Chapter 1672. When Zhang Qishao finally stopped laughing, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your high opinion. I'm afraid it's impossible for me to join the Xianjian sect." "Eh? Why is that?" Zhang Yutong was secretly happy to hear Zhang Qingxiao's explanation. "Don't ask too much." Zhang Qishao waved his hand impatiently and said, "You should think about your own safety first. I's safety is not in my hands." Zhang Yutong sighed and said, "I would like to know more about the demonic sect. I also want to know why someone like Zhang Qishao joined the demonic sect. Is it that important to reach the foundation establishment stage?" "Foundation establishment?" Zhang Qishao glanced at Zhang Yutong, then looked at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting in the west, and the orange-red clouds scattered over the mountains. After a while, Zhang Qishao said faintly, "How about foundation establishment? How about golden core? But it's all loneliness. How can it be compared to family? How can it be compared to reuniting with family? I didn't join the demonic sect for cultivation, but for an unforgettable blood feud. For this blood feud, I wouldn't hesitate to become a demon." Zhang Yutong's heart trembled when she saw Zhang Qingxiao's handsome face flash with a trace of ferocity. She pondered for a moment and said softly, "I didn't know. Please forgive me if I made you sad." Zhang Qishao stared into the distance as if he didn't hear anything. Zhang Yutong also looked at the setting sun in the distance. Seeing that half of the sun had disappeared, she asked again, "Zhang Qishao, if it's just for the blood feud, the Xianjian sect can help you." "Really?" Zhang Qishao turned his head slightly and looked at Zhang Yutong, who was a little embarrassed. He smiled and said, "How can the Xianjian sect help? Does Zhang Qishao know who the enemy is? If they have a name, then it's easy. You should know the flying swords of the sword cultivators. They are much better than the cultivators of the same level." Zhang Yutong was happy and whispered, "Haha, I understand Zhang Qingxiao's thoughts." Zhang Qishao smiled and said, "Unfortunately, I don't know who the enemy is. Sigh, this is going to be difficult." Zhang Yutong's face darkened as she said, "Then, even if you join the Heavenly Demon sect, you won't be able to get your revenge." Zhang Qishao did not answer Zhang Yutong's question. Instead, she asked, "What if I know the name of the enemy? Your Xian Sword sect dares to make a move?" "Of course. I can make the decision." Zhang Yutong puffed up her chest, making it even more perky. "What is the cultivation level of your sect leader?" Zhang Qishao asked with a smile. "Second grade sword transformation stage. It's equivalent to the middle nascent soul stage of the Taoist sect," Zhang Yutong said. "Isn't that enough to avenge you?" "Ha ha, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Qishao clapped his hands and said, "I appreciate fellow Taoist Zhang's kind intentions. However, do you think that your sect leader will help you? Furthermore," at this point, Zhang Qingxiao's tone became somewhat gloomy. "Furthermore, I's enemies are two nascent soul stage cultivators. Do you think that your Xian Sword sect will take action?" Zhang Yutong never thought that Zhang Qingxiao's enemies would be nascent soul stage cultivators. She couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. That's right, a nascent soul stage cultivator isn't just a problem for a single cultivator, it's a problem for an entire sect. Xian Sword sect can't possibly face two nascent soul stage cultivators for Zhang Qishao. Even if it's for me, I have to face two nascent soul stage cultivators and two sects. Fellow Taoist Zhang, now do you understand why I joined the Heavenly Demon sect? The corners of Zhang Qingxiao's lips curled into a smile. It was indescribably desolate, and even the residual red in the sky could not compare to it. Only the sect master of the Heavenly Demon sect would have such courage to help this poor Taoist avenge my debt of gratitude. Zhang Yutong's heart was also sad. She knew that the cultivator in front of her might not be a nascent soul stage cultivator or a golden core stage cultivator, but the hatred in his heart was boundless. He swore to kill even a nascent soul stage cultivator. This kind of man who did not care about his own situation and whether or not he had joined the Heavenly Demon sect, She was afraid that she could not simply see him as a heavenly demon sect cultivator. Fellow Taoist Zhang, can you tell I a little bit? Zhang Yutong asked tentatively. Perhaps there are other better ways to solve your problem? Other ways? Zhang Qingxiao's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. She shook her head and said, Fellow Taoist Zhang, it's already late. You should go back early. Although my sect leader is not here, there are other disciples watching over me. If they see me, I will be punished. Seeing that Zhang Qixiao was avoiding the topic, Zhang Yutong could only smile and say, I was just curious. At the same time, I was afraid that fellow Taoist would be blinded by hatred and affect your cultivation. Since fellow Taoist does not want to say more, then I will go back. After saying that, she turned around and went down the hill. She went back to the small courtyard. Zhang Qixiao glanced at Zhang Yutong's back and turned to look at the twilight in the sky. She muttered to herself, A blood feud, if it could be easily avenged, why would it be called a blood feud? Then, a trace of bitterness appeared on her face. As far as she knew, Duan Yuming and Wang Shuyao from the Xianjian sect had entered Ming Kingdom and found the Taiqing sect, but her plan had not been fully realized. The Taiqing sect and the Changbai sect had sent disciples to search for Zhang Yutong. Even the disciples of the various sects who participated in the Feather Immortal gathering were investigated. All the sects wanted to find Lu Weigang's whereabouts through clues to prove that the Taoist sect had nothing to do with this matter. As for the Xianjian sect, they did not send any other disciples to question her. Where did Zhang Yuhe go? Did she encounter any danger? Zhang Qixiao asked herself again. If she can go back according to my plan, she will definitely be able to stir up trouble. Without this girl, the situation is not good enough. Xiaohua, my good junior brother. Second brother has already excluded you from the list. But I didn't expect you to reach the 12th layer in just a few years. What secrets do you have? Could it be that Shan Huaming's annihilation has something to do with you? The Imperial Thunder sect is a famous sect, but with your talent, how could you reach the late stage of the Qi refinement realm so easily? Zhang Qingxiao's face showed a trace of anger again. If Master's death has anything to do with you, don't blame me for being ruthless. 3 nascent soul cultivators have to be killed, and you, a Qi refinement realm disciple, I will also kill you. Among the 3 peaks of the Taiqing sect, on the human peak, the rightmost peak, someone also mentioned Xiaohua's name in a cave. This was a very spacious cave. On the cloud platform, Deming frowned, but his eyes were closed and his face was very ugly. There was a praying mat 10 feet in front of him. Renju's face was also gloomy. Although her eyes were not closed, her brows were also tightly knitted. In the corner of the cave, thin smoke floated from an incense burner. The smoke went straight into the air and didn't dissipate for a long time. In the corner opposite the incense burner, a lifelike puppet was holding a jade plate in its hand. It stood there blankly, its black eyes were like black jade, without a trace of life. Deming! Martial uncle! Renju pondered for a moment and said, It has been several months since the messenger of the Xian sword sect left our Taiqing sect. According to the news from the Changbai sect, the image in the flying sword message was Lu Weigang. But Lu Weigang was driven out of the Hao realm by our Taiqing sect, and he didn't return to the Changbai sect. Deming opened his eyes slightly and looked at Renju, saying in a low voice, Renju, do you still need to say this? If Lu Weigang returned to the Changbai sect, how could he kill 2 sword cultivators? Besides, he is only a 12th layer disciple, not even a foundation building disciple. How could he be a match for 2 sword cultivators at the middle stage of the foundation building realm? Then, I don't understand. Who in the 3 cultivation kingdoms has the strength? Oh no, who has the guts to kill 2 sword cultivators from afar? This is obviously a conflict between the sword cultivators and the Taoist sect. Renju shook her head slightly. Let the Changbai sect have a headache. The Feather Immortal conference hosted by our Taiqing sect has ended. We have done what we should do. We have received the 2 sword cultivators with great hospitality, and exchanged what we should with them. The messenger of the Xian sword sect can't find any fault with it. Deming frowned. Speaking of the conflict between the two sects, it has been going on since ancient times. But for the past few hundred years, the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountain have restrained the sword cultivators. Our Taoist sect has invested a lot in the demon-resisting valley, so there hasn't been a big mess. Since the demon-resisting valley will be mentioned after 1,000 years, how can our Taoist sect be afraid of the sword cultivators? Martial uncle, you are right! Renju nodded and said, sword cultivators are always arrogant and unreasonable. This time, they sent a messenger to win the argument. I'm afraid they have no time to care about us. Our Taoist sect doesn't lack etiquette. Our Taiching sect has sent disciples to contact other sects and sects to confirm that they have nothing to do with the disappearance of the two sword cultivators. Who will be afraid of the sword cultivators? Look, the two sword cultivators of the second grade of the illusory sword realm have been searching the Dawn Rain continent for more than a year, but they didn't find anything either, right? He, the leader of the Changbai sect, Yunmingzi, is furious. He has to face the questioning of the Xian sword sect and send disciples to interrogate and search for Lu Weigang's whereabouts. As long as Lu Weigang is not found, the Changbai sect is afraid that the Xian sword sect will come to their door. Deming smiled. Although the two of us managed to find the whereabouts of the Feather Immortal Conference, we didn't make any mistakes and were rewarded by the leader. This is a small regret, and the leader has no intention to ask about it. Hearing this, Renju's thoughts moved. She scanned with her divine sense and said in a low voice, there are no mistakes, but there are some accidents. Yes. Deming nodded. The sword embryo was taken away by Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder sect. This is really unexpected. That's not all. Renju said as she patted her storage bag and took out a diamond-shaped crystal. An illusion formation image? Deming was dazed. Could it be, there are traces of Lu Weigang inside? Didn't the messenger of the Xian sword sect already see it? Martial uncle, don't be impatient. Renju patted her hand and a picture scroll appeared in the air. It was the battle between Xiao Hua and the Taiching sect disciple, He Fan Yuan. -7. Chapter 1673. After watching the battle between Xiao Hua and He Fan Yuan, Deming's eyes flashed with a strange light. He nodded slightly and said, this Xiao Hua has a merciful heart. His control of strength is also very flexible. He can actually stop the force of 10,000 kilograms at the most critical moment. Only this kind of realm where a cultivator is at death's door can give birth to a trace of life, and touch a trace of hope of foundation establishment in cultivation. If there was only one, I can also see it as occasional. But the two people who fought Xiao Hua were both foundation establishment cultivators. This is a problem. Renju put away the diamond-shaped crystal and said in a low voice. Disciple also suspected that this Xiao Hua is a person with great ability. Eh? How is that possible? Deming said in surprise. Of course, when Xiao Hua raised the sword embryo, I clearly saw that he was at the initial stage of Qi refinement realm. Could it be, he can deceive foundation establishment and even golden core cultivators? Renju smiled and said. Disciple also thought so before. However, the disciple I sent to Imperial Thunder Sect to ask Zhen Qing about sword cultivation brought back news that Xiao Hua started to build his foundation not long after he returned to Imperial Thunder Sect. Hearing about building his foundation, Deming nodded slightly, but Renju's words made him stunned. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua failed to build his foundation. Eh? How is that possible? Deming unexpectedly said. How is that possible? For the second time. This Qi refinement disciple is a genius. He was born with divine strength and can easily help others build their foundation. How could he fail to build his foundation? Renju smiled bitterly. How could this matter be wrong? Xiao Hua indeed failed to build his foundation and became the laughingstock of Imperial Thunder Sect. Sigh, heaven is playing with people. Deming shook his head. Heaven is the most playful. Presumably, Xiaohua himself didn't think he couldn't build his foundation, right? Right. Deming suddenly remembered and said in a low voice. The matter of Xiaohua helping others build their foundation must be kept a secret for the time being. He, disciple knows. Renju smiled. Xiaohua isn't our Tai Ching sect's disciple. How can disciples show off this matter? Xiaohua probably doesn't even know his own value. If Imperial Thunder Sect finds out, who knows how many Foundation Establishment disciples they can create? You. Deming was a bit confused. Renju naturally knew what Deming was thinking. She hurriedly transmitted her voice to him. I've also asked my disciples to try this method. How is it? One of them was killed by the hammer. Renju smiled bitterly and said. The other two didn't have any effect. AI Foundation Establishment, and it's not that simple. Deming heaved a long sigh. Perhaps this Xiaohua also encountered it. What does He Fang Yuan say? He Fang Yuan himself was also confused. He only felt an endless force pressing down on his body. He suddenly woke up and his true qi began to condense. Renju naturally asked He Fang Yuan and said. He also didn't know if it was Xiaohua's intention or not. Even golden core cultivators like us can't do anything about it. How can an aura-refining disciple like him do anything about it? I'm not looking down on aura-refining cultivators. Deming shook his head. This matter was indeed inconceivable. If someone could control the Foundation Establishment, then how could there be so few Foundation Establishment cultivators? This disciple has the same thoughts. Renju smiled apologetically and said, Unfortunately, these images can't be recorded. Moreover, there's no image of Changbai Sect's Fan Tong and Xiaohua's battle, otherwise we could have looked at it carefully. We still have to pay attention to Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiaohua. Although he has nothing to do with sword cultivation, if there's really a possibility, as long as there's a possibility that he's related to Foundation Establishment, we can't relax. Deming said. Yes, I understand. Renju nodded. Imperial Thunder Sect doesn't know Xiaohua's importance, and Xiaohua killed Fan Tong. Changbai Sect's Taoist Jingru probably won't let this matter go. At that time, our Tai Ching sect might have a chance. A aura-refining disciple, if we give him some benefits, and he can have a place to settle down, he'll probably obediently join our Tai Ching sect, right? And if we find a golden core disciple to be his master, how could he not be happy? If he can really help our Tai Ching sect's aura-refining disciple reach Foundation Establishment as shown in the illusion, that would be a great merit. Deming smiled. Then his brows relaxed, and he closed his eyes again. Renju then transmitted her voice to him. No one knew what they were talking about. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye several years had passed. In the 3 kingdoms of cultivation, many strange things had happened in the kingdom of Shi, kingdom of Meng, and kingdom of Lian. No one knew how many powerful cultivators had fallen. During the Feather Immortal gathering, the 2 missing sword cultivators had not been forgotten yet, but very few people had mentioned them. Even Duan Yuming and Wang Xiao had searched many places and forced the Changbai sect into a state of chaos. However, they only had the images of flying swords. Lu Weigang seemed to have disappeared even more cleanly than the 2 sword cultivators. Not a single trace of him could be found. Furthermore, the Xianjian sect was restrained by millions of soul cultivators in Ming Mountain and had no time to be distracted. Gradually, the Changbai sect slacked off and ignored Duan Yuming and Wang Xiao. The 2 sword cultivators had no choice but to slowly search in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. Furthermore, the Xiaoyu continent was vast. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to travel all over it even after several decades. One day, in the Myriad Thunder Valley, Helplessness sat on a jade chair with a gloomy face and asked Xiangyang coldly, "Where's that little bastard? Is he still fooling around in the book pavilions of the lightning palaces?" Xiangyang didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly stood up and bowed. "Yes, Master knows. Little junior brother has been cultivating diligently these past few years in order to build his foundation. He hasn't slacked off. Humph, hasn't slacked off? Then he's not doing his job properly. Helplessly, he slapped the jade chair and said angrily, What did you do after you failed to build your foundation? How did this little brat do it? It's not like I haven't built my foundation before. Can't I tell with one look? Embarrassed, Xiangyang said. Little junior brother is different from me, different my ass. Helplessly, he scolded. That little bastard isn't even as good as you. At least you built your foundation after 50 years. That little bastard probably can't even build his foundation after 500 years. Sigh. Why was I late that year? That Wang Yuxiao was chosen by me first. Why did I choose a disciple with a loose cultivator background? He really made me lose all my face. Husband. Beside him, Xue Minghui asked curiously. After you scolded Xiaohua last time, didn't you say you didn't want to see him anymore? You don't want to worry about him anymore? Why did you suddenly mention Xiaohua today? Humph, you think I was willing to see him last time? If Marshal Uncle Jian Qing didn't have something to ask him, I wouldn't see that little bastard. Helplessly, he snorted and said, Just now, Jinyu sent me a message. His disciple, Wang Yuxiao, has also built his foundation. Ah? That, the disciple that Master originally fancied? Xiangyang exclaimed. Xiangyang didn't open his mouth, but once he did, helplessly shouted angrily. That's right, it's all my bad luck. Just as helplessly was about to get angry, a thunder sound transmitting talisman flew in from outside the cave. Helplessly unhappily patted the talisman and heard Zhen Qing's voice. Marshal nephew helplessly, where is Xiaohua now? Tell him to come see me. Helplessly, he crushed the sound transmitting talisman, and his expression didn't change. Marshal Uncle Zhen Qing really cares about that little bastard. Last time, I heard she even personally comforted him. Soon after, he waved his hand and another thunder sound transmitting talisman was sent out. Obviously, he wanted to find Xiaohua. Seeing that his master was sending a sound transmitting talisman, Xiangyang hurriedly wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. The thunder sound transmitting talisman flew out of Helplessly's hand and circled around the cave before flying back. Seeing that Helplessly was about to change his expression again, Xiangyang hurriedly went forward and said, Master, I don't know which Thunder Palace's library little junior marshal brother is in. There are restrictions in there. I'm afraid sound transmitting talismans won't work. It's better for me to go find him personally. Humph. Helplessly, in his rage, came to a realization. If he could find Xiaohua, why would Zhen Qing send him a sound transmitting talisman? Go, hurry up and let that little bastard escape from the pile of old books. He can't build his foundation even if he hides there for 500 years. Seeing that the 5-year foundation establishment experiential learning is about to begin, let him prepare and go out with the other disciples. Helplessly sighing, he waved his sleeves and let Xiangyang go out. Xiangyang and Yan Qinglian left the cave. Yan Qinglian took out several invisibility talismans from her storage pouch and handed them to Xiangyang. Husband, bring these invisibility talismans to little junior marshal brother. The foundation establishment experiential learning is different from other things. With the help of these invisibility talismans, his chances of success will increase a bit. Okay. Xiangyang took them and put them into his storage pouch. He said in a low voice. Half a year ago, little junior marshal brother said he wanted to go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library. I wonder if he's there now. I don't know what's wrong with little junior marshal brother. What's there to see in the library? He's already read it once before. This time, he's spent 5 years reading it again. Yan Qinglian also sighed. Using these 5 years to cultivate, maybe. Xiangyang waved his hand to stop Yan Qinglian from saying anything more. He himself flew up and used the hibernating thunder escape to fly towards the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiangyang's realm had stepped into the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. He had also gradually mastered the hibernating thunder evasion. Even though it was still a lot worse than Xiaohua's hibernating thunder evasion from 5 years ago, he had, after all, started cultivating the thunder evasion technique. But what about Xiaohua 5 years later? Right now, he was in the Heavenly Thunder Palace's Starlight Library. He was sending a jade slip into the void. Afterwards, he sat down cross-legged and recalled in detail. Only after a long while did he open his eyes. He let out a long breath and said to himself, "The Grand Universe Shifting Command!" That command arrow was actually the incomplete Grand Universe Shifting Command. If I hadn't read the records of the 8 Great Thunder Palaces, how would I have been able to deduce it? The records of the 8 Great Thunder Palaces' ancient books are also strange. Cultivation techniques and the like are divided into realms, but travel notes, strange stories and the like are not divided into realms. Anyone who can enter the library can read it. But I have read these ancient books for 5 years, and actually, I haven't met a single disciple who came to look at them. Could it be that they don't know that reading an ancient book is equivalent to traveling once? Xiaohua also didn't feel any pain. 5 years, ah? How good would it be to use it to cultivate? Who would waste 5 years of time to read some ancient book for no reason? Even when Jinxie and the others examined the ruins of the Buddhist sect, they were also cultivating. After all, they didn't have fire essence flame crystals, right? -7. Chapter 1674. With the fire marrow flame crystal, Xiaohua's cultivation method and speed were naturally different from others. After he failed to build his foundation, he relied on the prairie fire cultivation method to enter the 13th layer of the aura refining realm that no one had ever cultivated before. After only 200 or so days, he broke through another bottleneck and entered the so-called 14th layer of the aura refining realm. Afterwards, he used more than a year to refine the last flame in his meridians, and reached the bottleneck of the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. Afterwards, he returned to the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden and used the second fire marrow flame crystal to break through to the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. Only then did he leave the medicinal garden and finish reading the remaining ancient books in the Thunder Palace while raising his cultivation level to the late stage of the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. He believed that in less than a year, he would be able to step foot into the 16th layer of the aura refining realm. However, as his cultivation level increased, the refining speed of the fire marrow flame crystal slowed down. However, Xiaohua didn't mind. He knew that his real refining speed didn't slow down at all. It was just that after his cultivation level increased, it would be difficult to advance further. From the 10th layer of the aura refining realm to the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, it would definitely take longer than from the 11th layer to the 12th layer of the aura refining realm. Therefore, he could peacefully enjoy the joy of cultivation. Naturally, Xiaohua was still in the aura refining realm, so he definitely didn't have any spiritual pressure. Moreover, Xiaohua had cultivated a concealment technique, so he only needed to disguise himself slightly. From the outside, his cultivation level was no different from an ordinary late-stage 12th layer disciple. As for his true cultivation level? Could a cultivator who had cultivated more than half of a foundation building technique be compared to an aura refining realm cultivator? If he wanted to compare, he could only compare with a foundation building cultivator. Xiaohua put the jade slip back, looked around, and grabbed it from somewhere in the sea of stars. Afterwards, his figure flew into the distance. When he arrived at a place covered in mist, he pointed his finger again. The mist was diluted a lot, revealing a lot of rhombus-shaped brilliance. These rhombus-shaped brilliances flashed in 2 colors, dark green and earthy yellow. Xiaohua swept his gaze over them and flew towards one of the earthy yellow brilliances. Strangely, as Xiaohua flew closer to the mist, his whole body gradually shrank. When he entered the mist, he was almost as small as a mung bean. The earthy yellow brilliance in front of him had already enlarged. It was a quiet room. Xiaohua skillfully formed a seal and entered the quiet room. Soon after, he closed the quiet room. Xiaohua looked at it for a moment, and suddenly, joy appeared on his face. He slapped his forehead, and a sword pellet the size of a chicken egg appeared in his hand. At this time, the sword pellet was different from a few years ago. When Xiaohua obtained the sword pellet, The surface of the oval sword pellet was bumpy. There were many cracks, and the cracks were quite deep. But at this moment, the entire sword pellet's surface was smooth and tidy. All the cracks had disappeared, and there was a faint brilliance flowing on the sword pellet. It looked very lively. Strange. I thought the smallest sword pellet would be the easiest to repair, but I didn't expect the largest sword pellet to be repaired first. Xiaohua's Buddhist consciousness swept across the Buddha heart of the Buddha relic, and he was a little surprised. Furthermore, the degree of repair of the other 8 sword pellets is also different. It seems that the smaller the sword pellets, the harder it is to repair. The smallest sword pellet had a crack that went deep into the pellet's heart. It didn't change at all. Could it be that the smaller this sword orb is, the more powerful it is? Xiaohua frowned slightly and looked at the sword pellet in his hand that was emitting a mixture of blood red and azure light. He did his best to immerse his Buddhist consciousness into it. In these 5 years, Xiaohua had also been cultivating the exquisite leaf scripture. His Buddhist consciousness had naturally improved by leaps and bounds. However, the cultivation of Buddhist consciousness was too difficult. This improvement was truly insignificant compared to the Tao sect realm. The azure and red sword pellet spun around in Xiaohua's hand. In his Buddhist consciousness, the sword pellet's quality was meticulous, and there were countless strange runes inside. However, these runes were very dull and didn't have the liveliness of the spirit sword, described in the sword sect's secret books. Alas, this flying sword is still inferior. Xiaohua withdrew his Buddhist consciousness and threw the sword pellet into the air. He sighed in his heart. If I really succeed in nurturing a sword, it's like the birth of a life. The sword spirit inside is just born. Even if it's not as lively as a living being, it still has the fluctuations of a living being. This sword pellet has already reached the stage of nurturing a sword, but it doesn't have the slightest bit of liveliness. According to sword cultivators, it should be stillborn. Forget it. I'm not a sword cultivator in the first place. It's already enough to have a flying sword. Using this flying sword together with the Tao sect's sword controlling technique can also be considered average. Xiaohua thought and extended his finger. He didn't seem to make any movements, but the black iron needle suddenly appeared in midair before his eyes. Then, it suddenly pierced towards Xiaohua's extended finger. Unfortunately, it was like piercing black iron of the same quality. The black iron needle only pierced a little and couldn't pierce any further. Damn it! Xiaohua scolded jokingly. This great strength Vajra technique is strange. My body originally had rough skin and thick flesh, but now I can't even drip a drop of blood. And nurturing a sword requires a cultivator's blood essence. This is making things difficult for me. While joking and scolding, Xiaohua twisted his hand and urged his magic power. The black iron needle flashed with a cold light, then slowly pierced into Xiaohua's finger. Immediately after, the black iron needle was pulled out, and a drop of blood-red blood floated in midair. Xiaohua slightly closed his eyes and muttered something. Different spells entered the drop of blood in his hands. The drop of blood started to boil, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a blood membrane the size of a chicken egg. Quick! Xiaohua fiercely opened his eyes and pointed his finger. A golden brilliance flashed on the blood membrane and flew towards the sword pellet at the side. The blood membrane wrapped around the sword pellet and quickly seeped into it. Following the disappearance of the blood membrane, the sword pellet started to gradually vibrate up and down. Moreover, the vibrations became more and more intense. A trace of apprehension flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. He knew that this was the beginning of his blood essence controlling the sword pellet. If the sword pellet wasn't completely repaired, or if his blood essence couldn't control the sword pellet, then the flying sword couldn't be nurtured. Moreover, looking at the way the sword pellet was vibrating up and down, he was afraid that there were traces of the original owner nurturing the sword inside. After a moment, there was another buzzing sound, and the sword pellet suddenly stopped. Soon after, a drop of tainted blood was forced out. As soon as the tainted blood flew out of the sword pellet, it immediately rushed towards Xiaohua. Ouch! Xiaohua was shocked. His Buddhist sense swept over, and a vicious aura came from the tainted blood. It felt very powerful. Without hesitation, Xiaohua dodged and immediately called Goldie out from the space. As soon as Goldie came out of the space, its nose twitched, and its eyes were filled with joy. Goldie's nose twitched again, and a white brilliance came out of Goldie's nose, covering the tainted blood. The tainted blood seemed to know the power of the white light, and hurriedly tried to change direction. Unfortunately, under the powerful suction of the white light, the tainted blood couldn't move at all. In the blink of an eye, a strange shadow was pulled out from the tainted blood by the white light. Before Xiaohua could see it clearly, it was sucked into Goldie's nose. After eating the shadow, Goldie's face showed a trace of satisfaction. It actually shook its tail and stretched out its claws, looking like it was stretching its waist. After Xiaohua sent Goldie into the space, Goldie lay down as if it had fallen asleep, just like when it first swallowed Hemingway's primordial spirit. That was close! Xiaohua wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and rejoiced. Fortunately, I've read so many ancient books these past few years and know that these are all imprints related to the primordial spirit. Only special divine abilities or strange beasts like Goldie can restrain them. Otherwise, it would be really troublesome. But I'm still inexperienced. I started nurturing the sword without making any preparations. This isn't a new sword pellet, but someone else used it before, and it's even damaged. This shadow in the tainted blood. I wonder if it was originally a sword cultivator, or a soul cultivator injured by this sword cultivator's flying sword. Xiaohua began to reflect on his own shortcomings. Soon after, he waved his hand, and a wisp of pure, jade-green samadhi true fire was emitted from his hand. It burned the blood that had stopped in midair and disappeared without a trace. Looking at the sword pellet that was emitting a buzzing sound, the sound was extremely ear-piercing. In the sound, two faint wings seemed to unfold on both sides of the sword pellet, but when Xiaohua wanted to take a closer look, the wings disappeared. Moreover, the entire sword pellet was like a melted candle, gradually softening into a palm-sized sword shape. Following the formation of the flying sword, Xiaohua's eyes showed joy. He saw that the new flying sword was green and red, and a baleful aura and a sharp aura intertwined together. It was far more powerful than the flying sword Xiaohua had seen before. What made Xiaohua even happier was that once this flying sword was born, he felt a kind of free and easy control from the bottom of his heart, a kind of feeling like an arm was born. Even if it's not a spirit sword, even if there's no sword origin, I's sword is still enough for me. Xiaohua laughed heartily and waved his hand. The flying sword suddenly turned around and flew into Xiaohua's hand like a small snake that had intelligence. When the flying sword landed in his hand, a kind of sometimes boiling hot and sometimes cold feeling came from his hand, unconsciously causing Xiaohua to frown slightly. What's going on? Xiaohua closed his eyes tightly and carefully savored the sensation. After a long while, he muttered, "This coldness seems to be a sharp feeling, and it is transmitted to my skin. And this boiling hot, burning feeling doesn't seem to be purely coming from my skin. It feels more like a kind of fear in my heart." Xiaohua suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. This is probably the power of karma that Master and Master's wife talked about. Go! Xiaohua pointed his finger, and the flying sword flew into the air. It was much faster than the flying sword talisman Xiaohua used before. Seeing the flying sword move somewhat clumsily in the air under his control, Xiaohua slightly shook his head. A flying sword talisman is a flying sword talisman. It's really different from a flying sword. I'm afraid that the Dao Sect's flying sword technique is different from the sword cultivator's sword control technique. Unfortunately, I don't know when I'll be able to obtain the sword control technique. Just at this moment, a wave of confusion suddenly appeared in front of Xiaohua's eyes. -7. Chapter 1675. Speaking of which, Xiaohua's eyes suddenly appeared perplexed. His eyes were no longer staring at the flying sword in the air. At this moment, a set of sword-controlling technique appeared in Xiaohua's mind. Countless images and countless words gushed out from unknown places and were deeply engraved in his memory. Sword playing the world. The bewilderment in Xiao Hua's eyes gradually disappeared and was replaced by a deep joy. Soon after, he closed his eyes again. After a long while, he still didn't make any movements, but the flying sword in front of him that had stopped long ago suddenly flew again. At this time, its speed was many times faster than before, and its flight path was much more mysterious. Swoosh! While the flying sword was flying, it suddenly turned into two sword lights. The flying swords in these two sword lights were exactly the same. The two flying swords flew for a moment, and transformed again. This time, it turned into four again. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the entire quiet room actually produced 8 sword lights that continuously danced around Xiao Hua's surroundings. Gather! Xiao Hua shouted. The 8 sword lights converged into one place, and once again turned into a green-red flying sword that stopped in front of him. Hee, this is the true sword-controlling technique! The corner of Xiao Hua's mouth rose, and he had a trace of pride. Sword playing the world has 9 levels. I'm currently only at the first level. There are also 9 sword orbs, and there are still 8 that haven't been nurtured. Could it be that in the unseen world, these 9 sword orbs were born for this sword playing the world? If I can really master this sword playing the world and nurture all 9 sword orbs, I'm afraid I can really control the sword under the world. Xiao Hua's gaze looked at the flying sword again and again, and he thought, the sword has a name. My flying sword also needs a name, but I don't know what to call it. Just as this thought appeared, Chasing Dream jumped out of his mind again. Chasing Dream? Xiao Hua slightly frowned. Chasing dreams? Too childish. Thinking about how he was attacked by the heart demon several years ago, Xiao Hua's eyes slightly flashed with a cold light, and he muttered, why don't we call it Chasing Dream? Killing all the nightmares. Thinking here, Xiao Hua's heart jumped for no reason, and an indescribable palpitation rose in his heart. Whoosh whoosh. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to think carefully, the entire quiet room actually made a sound like a tide, and the entire restriction began to shake. Eh? A message from a disciple on duty in the library? Xiao Hua was stunned. He glanced at the dream executioner and opened his mouth. The dream executioner flew into Xiao Hua's mouth and was kept into his Buddha heart. He continued to burn it with the Tai green qi and infinite karmic fire. When Xiao Hua came out of the quiet room, a middle-stage foundation establishment robust man was standing in front of the door. He looked Xiao Hua up and down and asked, are you Xiao Hua of the Thunderclap Palace? Disciple is indeed Xiao Hua, greetings to Senior. Xiao Hua bowed in salute. May I know why Senior is looking for this disciple? Your eldest senior brother came to find you. He said it was urgent. The brawny man said. Go out and take a look. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Xiao Hua to answer before his figure flashed slightly, and then a ball of indistinct clouds appeared beneath his feet before it carried him up into the starry sky and vanished. Eldest senior brother? Xiao Hua frowned even more. He knew that in the past 5 years, he had only gone to the Myriad Thunder Valley a few times, but Helplessness had refused to see him. The only time he had seen Helplessness and Xiangyang was when the Taiching sect had sent a disciple to ask about the sword cultivators of the Xianjian sect. However, Helplessness had ignored Xiao Hua and had a look of disappointment on his face. This made Xiao Hua's heart go cold. What's the matter this time? It can't be that Master is being merciful, and wants to see this good-for-nothing disciple of mine. Xiao Hua laughed self-deprecatingly. The path of cultivation that he had walked was truly shocking, and it was different from the cultivation of ordinary people. There was no reason for him to talk about it with others. This kind of loneliness, this kind of indifference, he could only taste and understand it himself. Xiao Hua placed the jade slip in his hand into the starry sky, then left the library and arrived outside the main hall of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiangyang was a disciple of the Thunderclap Palace, and without the Heavenly Thunder Palace's token, he couldn't enter the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Seeing Xiao Hua come out, Xiangyang's face relaxed. Eldest senior brother, is master looking for me? Xiaohua smiled and greeted him. Cough, cough. Xiangyang coughed and said in a low voice. It's not master looking for you, it's Senior Zhen Qing from the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Senior Zhen? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. At the same time, there was a trace of disappointment in his heart. Then I'll go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiaohua bowed and said. Let's go, I'll accompany you. Xiangyang said with a smile and pulled Xiaohua's sleeve. Eldest senior brother, your cultivation is more important. I'll go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace myself. Xiaohua knew that Xiangyang had spent too much time in the early stage of foundation establishment. Although he didn't know his exact age, he still used 50 years to reach foundation establishment. In the 200 years of a foundation establishment cultivator's lifespan, he might not be able to cultivate into Jindan. If he couldn't cultivate into Jindan, it would be impossible to extend his lifespan. Therefore, for Xiangyang, every moment was precious. Xiangyang knew what Xiaohua meant and said with a smile. I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation these past few days. Even if I cultivate bitterly, I still can't break through. It's better to come out and walk around. Xiaohua also didn't know whether what Xiangyang said was true or not, so he could only nod and follow Xiangyang's hibernating thunder escape. He also flew behind Xiangyang. Not long after Xiaohua left, a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace came out of the main hall. Looking at the direction Xiaohua flew in, he clapped his hand and sent out a thunder sound transmitting talisman, then flew in another direction. After flying for a while, Xiangyang couldn't help but turn his head and ask, Little junior brother, recently, how's your cultivation? Thank you for your concern, eldest senior brother. Everything is normal. Xiaohua smiled and told the truth. Xiangyang naturally didn't think so and said, Actually, when you encounter a bottleneck, it's naturally good to look for ancient books or look at other cultivation methods, but you can't always look at them. Cultivating behind closed doors isn't the way of cultivation. Little junior brother, you should still cultivate in places with abundant spiritual energy like before. Yes, I know. Xiaohua naturally nodded. In addition, your cultivation can't increase at this time. You should still go out and experience more. Maybe you'll encounter an opportunity to reach foundation establishment just like the Feather Immortal Assembly. Hearing this, Xiaohua's heart moved. Sure enough, Xiangyang said. For disciples who are at the late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining but can't reach foundation establishment, my Imperial Thunder Sect will give them the opportunity to experience the world every 5 years. If little junior brother feels that you can't make any progress in the Imperial Thunder Sect, you can go out and experience the world. Xiaohua didn't need to experience the world. What he lacked now was time to refine the fire essence flame crystal and finish the so-called 18th layer of qi refining as soon as possible so that he could reach foundation establishment as soon as possible. Yes, thank you for your reminder, eldest senior brother. I will consider it, Xiaohua replied, but his tone was careless. Xiangyang also knew that his little junior brother, who was born as a loose cultivator, had his own ideas and his words might not be effective. He sighed in his heart and clapped his hands, taking out a few invisibility talismans and handing them over. He said, This was refined by your senior sister. Keep it. It'll be useful for your future experience. Looking at the precious invisibility talismans, Xiaohua's heart felt warm. He took them and said, Thank you, senior sister and eldest senior brother. After I meet Senior Zhen, I will take care of the matter of my experience. I definitely won't disappoint senior sister. Good, Xiangyang said with a smile. It's not that senior sister and eldest senior brother are forcing you to go out. After all, you won't make any progress if you stay in the Eastern Ridge and the Book Collection Pavilion. Moreover, you must be careful when you go out to experience the world. Is there any organization for this 5 years of foundation establishment training? Or is there any fixed place in my Imperial Thunder Sect? Xiaohua knew that even if he didn't go, Sun Shu would probably ask him to go. He had promised her at the Feather Immortal Assembly, but at that time, he only thought that he would be able to build his foundation after returning to the Imperial Thunder Sect. He didn't expect that he would reach the 18th layer of the Qi refining realm. This outside experience is different from the Feather Immortal Assembly. You just have to report to your respective Thunder Palace. If there were any senior or junior brothers that they were familiar with, they could go together, and no one would question them. As for the place to experience the world, the Xiaoyu continent is fine. As long as you feel that there's an opportunity to build your foundation, you can go there. Xian Yang explained. However, before you go out, you still have to consider your own cultivation. If it's too dangerous, it's better not to go. Xiao Hua nodded. After flying for a while, he said in a low voice, "What about Master? How has he been recently?" Xian Yang bit his lip. With a somewhat gloomy expression, he told him what happened a few days ago. "Oh? Eldest senior brother came to the Heavenly Thunder Palace a few days ago? That one Yun Shao also built his foundation?" Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised. That's right. The Heavenly Thunder Palace can't be compared to the Deafening Thunder Palace. Moreover, you're in the book collection pavilion. Ordinary people can't enter. I only asked a warm-hearted senior brother to call you out. Thank you for your trouble, senior brother. Xiao Hua was somewhat ashamed. Don't say this. As long as you can build your foundation, it's enough for my myriad Thunder Valley. Xian Yang regretted saying this. Yes, junior brother knows. Xiao Hua smiled as if he didn't take it to heart. The Wang Yunxiao from a few years ago was already not worth mentioning in Xiao Hua's eyes. Now that his cultivation had advanced rapidly, even if Wang Yunxiao had already built his foundation, would Xiao Hua still care about him? Building his foundation was just an empty title. Alas, Xian Yang didn't understand. He thought that Xiao Hua was the same as him in the past, disheartened and gloomy. Therefore, he stopped talking about cultivation and picked up some other things to talk about. However, Xian Yang wasn't good at talking. After a few sentences, they talked about cultivation again. In the end, Xian Yang simply stopped talking. The two of them hurried on their way in silence. Zhen Qing was still in the pavilion at the back of the mountain. She scanned with her divine sense and knew that Xiao Hua had come, so she stopped playing the flute. After the disciple who led Xiao Hua here left, she said with a smile. A few days ago, I suddenly remembered something. It was precisely to return the favor at the Feather Immortal Assembly that I sent you a messaging talisman. Unexpectedly, the messaging talisman didn't leave. Presumably, you couldn't receive messages in the Deafening Thunder Palace, so you sent a message to your master. Return a favor? Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he was secretly delighted. He bowed and said, Disciple has failed to build his foundation. What's there to be afraid of if my cultivation is delayed for a day or half a day? It's just that disciple didn't come in time. I've made Grand Master wait for a long time. -7. Chapter 1677. After Xian Yang and Xiao Hua greeted Zhen Qing said that he wanted to return Xiao Hua's favor. Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel happy. How could a Golden Core Stage Senior's return gift be lacking? Xiao Hua said modestly. Disciple came late. Sorry for making Grand Master wait for so long. Disciple didn't mean to do that. How could I dare to make Grand Master owe me a favor? Zhen Qing didn't put on the airs of a Grand Master. He waved his sleeve and said with a smile, What I owe you is what I owe you. No matter what you say, I will return it. I don't dare to refuse a favor from an elder. Thank you for your kindness, Grand Master. Xiao Hua stopped while he was ahead. Zhen Qing glanced at Xian Yang and transmitted her voice to Xiao Hua. Do you remember that during the Feather Immortal gathering, when you obtained the sword embryo that was not controlled by divine sense, I said that I had seen something similar? Xiao Hua's heart warmed and he also said, Grand Master, disciple, naturally remembers. I didn't expect Grand Master to still remember after so many years. You don't know how it feels to owe a favor, Zhen Qing said with a smile. I wanted to give you some benefits after you reached the foundation establishment stage. However, you didn't reach the foundation establishment stage. In these 5 or 6 years, there was no movement. However, fortunately, I found the origin of that thing in these 5 or 6 years. Zhen Qing clapped his hand and took out a jade slip and handed it over. Speaking of this thing, it has some history. My master, Taoist Lu Peng, came across it by chance when he was training in the Xiaoyu continent. At that time, I was still young and only listened to it casually. If it wasn't for this strange sword embryo from the Taiqing sect, how could I remember it? Previously, I thought it was something related to our Imperial Thunder sect. After searching for a long time, I found it. Seeing Xiaohua take the jade slip, Zhen Qing said. However, this is something that happened 200 years ago. I can't guarantee that the thing is still there. Ah? 200 years? Xiaohua was a little shocked. Then, he felt even more grateful. Zhen Qing was a Golden Core Realm senior. She actually went through so much trouble just because of what she said earlier. She even brought up the matter from 200 years ago. This favor was really too big. Thank you, Grand Master. Disciple was really scared. Xiaohua bowed again. These are all illusory things, there's no need to thank me so early. Zhen Qing didn't mind at all. He flicked his sleeves and didn't let Xiaohua thank him. The other things in the jade slip are also some of this old man's experiences. If you have the chance, you can take a look at them carefully. Really? When Xiaohua heard this, he became even happier. He was already thinking about it in his heart. If it was just a piece of news, Zhen Qing wouldn't make such a big fuss. She only needed to send a message. Thus, he released his divine sense and immersed it into the jade slip. It was fine if he didn't read it, but after reading it, his face became even more interesting. However, before Xiaohua could say anything, Zhen Qing transmitted her voice to him. You don't have to tell anyone about this. Just take a look for yourself. Yes, disciple understands. Xiaohua carefully replied and put away the jade slip. Go. Cultivate carefully. This old man thinks highly of you. Zhen Qing looked at Xiangyang and said, cultivation is important. However, it also depended on the immortal fate. If there wasn't any immortal fate and you insisted on forcing it, you might not be able to obtain it at all. Your eldest martial brother is a good example. Although he used 50 years to reach the Foundation Establishment realm, he still reached the Foundation Establishment realm. Now, he has also reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Compared to those who haven't reached the Foundation Establishment realm, and those who are stuck at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, isn't he 100 times stronger? Yes, disciple understands. Xiaohua said with a smile. Cultivation is about cultivating the heart. Realms are just the surface. If your heart isn't strong enough, even if you have a realm, it will be difficult for you to progress further. Zhen Qing seemed to want to continue, but after saying a few words he smiled and said, These are too profound. They are just some of my experiences. I'm afraid you won't be able to comprehend them at the late stage of the qi refining realm. You're still young, so you should cultivate slowly. Don't be impatient. Thank you, Grand Master, for your guidance. Go. Zhen Qing waved his sleeve and flew into the air, gradually disappearing into the fog. Then, the melodious sound of the flute sounded again. The sound of the flute revealed a kind of relaxed and free feeling. Xiangyang accompanied Xiaohua out of the Zhenlei Palace. From the beginning to the end, he didn't say a word. He only looked at the jade slip given by Zhen Qing and didn't ask about it at all. After the two of them left the Zhenlei Palace and flew for a while, Xiangyang spoke for the first time. Little martial brother, are you going back to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library? Or are you following me back to the Myriad Thunder Valley to see Master? Xiaohua pondered for a moment and shook his head. I've already read most of the books in the Heavenly Thunder Palace. There's no need for me to go back this time. As for Master, do you think he'll be willing to see me? Master is also concerned about you. After saying this, Xiangyang couldn't say anything else. On the way to the Zhenlei Palace, he had already said everything he needed to say. He knew Xiaohua's temper better than anyone else. What he could endure, others might not be able to. Especially this little martial brother of a rogue cultivator background. He usually looked very easygoing, but his bones were full of pride. When faced with Xiaohua, who kept calling him little brat, he definitely wouldn't be able to calm down. Rather than that, it was better to not see him. I know, Xiaohua said calmly. I'm going to prepare to go out and travel. While Xiaohua was speaking, a crimson-red thunder sound transmitting talisman flew over and landed in front of Xiaohua. Hee, I'm afraid it's Shui Shui from the Sunlei Palace. Xiang Yang hurriedly changed the topic. Master's wife mentioned her a few times. Ever since you came back from the Tai Qing sect, she hasn't come to the Myriad Thunder Valley for more than 5 years. When is she free? Let her come over. Yes, I know. Xiaohua's face was slightly red. As he answered, he opened the sound-transmitting talisman. When he scanned it with his divine sense, a hesitant expression appeared on his face. What's wrong? Something happened again? Xiang Yang saw this and asked in a low voice. Oh, it's nothing, eldest martial brother. Xiaohua took out the sound-transmitting talisman and said a few words. Then, he raised his hand and sent the sound-transmitting talisman out with a smile. It's a martial sister who went to the Feather Immortal gathering. She wants to go with me to the Foundation Establishment realm. I've already agreed to this matter. Hearing this, Xiang Yang's face lit up. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, Great, I'm worried that you'll be in danger if you travel alone. With our martial brother. Eh? It's a martial sister? Yes, it's Shui Shui's martial sister, Sun Shu. She invited me at the Feather Immortal gathering. Xiaohua explained. Oh, so it's Sun Shu. Xiang Yang's face revealed an understanding expression. He nodded deeply and said, Yes, Sun Shu's cultivation and appearance are comparable to Shui Shui's. You should go. Eldest martial brother? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. He immediately understood the meaning of these words. But how could he explain such ambiguous words? Hee, I know. Xiang Yang waved his hand. You go back and prepare. I'll go back and tell Master's wife about this matter so that she won't worry. Master's wife? Xiaohua was even more stunned. His face was slightly embarrassed. Xiang Yang didn't say much. He turned around and flew away using the hibernating thunder escape. Before he left, he said, Little martial brother, before you left, you said that you wanted to send a sound-transmitting talisman to Master. If you've reached the Foundation Establishment realm, you'll return earlier. Foundation Establishment realm? Hee, I'm afraid it's not possible within a few years. Xiaohua thought. Then, he smiled and agreed. He also used the Awakening Thunder Escape and flew back to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden. Awakening Thunder Escape. No way? Xiang Yang was secretly happy for his little martial brother. He naturally turned around and glanced. He saw Xiaohua's figure disappearing in the distance. Seeing Xiaohua's thunder escape, Xiang Yang, who was using the hibernating thunder escape, was so shocked that he almost fell from the sky. Even though he wasn't too clear on what cultivation level the awakening lightning escape was, he knew that his own cultivation level at the middle stage of Foundation Establishment had only just recently succeeded in cultivating the hibernating lightning escape. The awakening lightning escape, as far as he was concerned, it was impossible for him to successfully cultivate it in this lifetime. As for Xiaohua, how could an aura condensation disciple possibly know it? I must have seen wrongly. Xiang Yang, who had always been honest, couldn't help but doubt his own eyes. He rubbed his eyes and sighed in his heart. He flew up again, but this time, his speed was much slower. Xiaohua didn't think that his awakening thunder escape would cause such a blow to Xiang Yang. He only felt warm in his heart. While flying, he immersed his divine sense into the jade slip that Zhen Qing gave him. Naturally, in the jade slip, Zhen Qing's master, Taoist Master Lu Ping, only recorded a small part of another material. The rest was what Zhen Qing really left for Xiaohua. This part of the jade slip was divided into two parts. The first part was the most important, accounting for 80%. It was all about the refining and use of magic treasures. Presumably, Jen Qing saw that the cloud-suppressing seal's incantation was incomplete, so she took the trouble to find a suitable incantation for Xiaohua. As for the other 20%, although there weren't many records, it was the most precious. It was actually Jen Qing's understanding of breaking through to the Foundation establishment realm. This understanding wasn't much. For Jen Qing, it was just a superficial understanding. But for Xiaohua, it was simply a mountain of gold. This was the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation establishment realm, not the understanding of breaking through to the Qi refinement realm. For Jen Qing, the understanding of breaking through to the Qi refinement realm was too far away. Perhaps she couldn't remember it clearly. Moreover, Xiaohua's master was helpless. Jen Qing taking out the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation establishment realm was too incongruous. Therefore, in order to counter Xiaohua's failure to break through to the Foundation establishment realm, Jen Qing could only take out the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation establishment realm. This was also the reason why Xiaohua was wild with joy when he saw the contents of the jade slip. At the same time, it was also the reason why Jen Qing transmitted a message to Xiaohua and didn't let him spread it outside. Xiaohua gave up on many things and only immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. He pondered over Jen Qing's understanding word by word. The more he pondered over it, the more he felt that every word was like a gem. Every word was like the bottom of his heart. Every word scratched the itch of his cultivation. An indescribable feeling spontaneously arose in his heart. Just as Xiaohua was scratching his head and cheering in his heart, a strong feeling of threat arose from the bottom of his heart, and it forcefully extinguished the lively feeling in his heart. -8. Chapter 1678. Xiaohua immediately stopped his escape technique and floated in midair. His gaze flickered as he looked around the wilderness again and again. "Come out!" Xiaohua shouted angrily, but his divine sense had locked onto a certain place. Clap, clap! The sound of palms clapping came from that place, and then a cultivator in a dark Taoist robe flew out from his hiding place. Xiaohua's pupils constricted when he saw that this cultivator was in the early stage of Foundation establishment, and didn't hide his appearance. At this time, he already recognized that this cultivator was the Foundation establishment cultivator who coveted him in the Eastern Mountain Range several years ago. "As expected, you defeated Xiaohua, the champion of the Feather Immortal Assembly. You truly deserve your reputation." The inexplicable cultivator clapped and laughed. "I was confident that my concealment technique was cultivated to a very high level, but you actually still saw through it." Xiaohua looked at him coldly and didn't answer. He was calculating this guy's origin in his mind. "What? You actually forgot about etiquette after seeing a Foundation establishment senior?" A trace of ridicule flashed through the cultivator's eyes. However, this ridicule also revealed a trace of coldness. How could Xiaohua salute? He sneered and said, "Since you're a senior, then you should have the integrity of a senior. What's the reason for hiding to the side and intercepting this junior?" "I intercepted you?" The cultivator laughed and pointed his hand. Xiaohua immediately dodged, afraid that the cultivator would use some kind of technique. "Humph, if I wanted to make things difficult for you, would I need to waste so much effort?" The cultivator didn't use any kind of technique, and it really seemed to be just a hand gesture. But at this time, Xiaohua's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly raised his head and slightly swept his gaze over the top of his head. His entire body suddenly retreated, and his speed seemed to not be inferior to the speed of flying just now. "Ha!" The expression of the cultivator in dark clothes also changed greatly. He received a message from someone and knew that Xiaohua might return to the Eastern Mountain Range's medicinal garden, so he set up a formation here in advance. Unfortunately, he was discovered by Xiaohua one step ahead and didn't fall into the formation. He said so much to stall for time so that his other companion could set up another formation. But he didn't expect that Xiaohua's divine sense would actually be so powerful, discovering the movements of another person. Moreover, Xiaohua's speed was so fast that the dark-clothed cultivator couldn't help but be vigilant. He slapped his forehead and released the pressure of a foundation establishment cultivator. A surge of power immediately pressed down on the distant Xiaohua. Following the release of this cultivator's pressure, the other fat cultivator in the air where Xiaohua was standing also revealed an expression of disbelief. He looked at the dark-robed cultivator in surprise and slapped his hand, releasing the same pressure that smashed down like a mountain. In the blink of an eye, Xiaohua had used the lightning escape technique to fly several tens of feet away. Just as he was about to be caught up by the two foundation establishment cultivators, the pressure from the top of his head firmly suppressed Xiaohua. His entire body couldn't even move. 17th brother, did this guy just use the awakening lightning escape? The fat cultivator saw that Xiaohua was under his control and asked curiously. The 17th brother was Jinhao of the Thunderclap Palace's Swallow Thunder Ridge, and the fat cultivator was Jinmiao, ranked 15th in Swallow Thunder Ridge. Good, 15th brother, it seems to be the case. Jinhao was also somewhat perplexed. But that's not very likely, right? Humph, this guy is a genius. Jinmiao coldly snorted. He's only in the 12th layer of Qi refining, yet he can already use the lightning escape technique. Even in the entire Imperial Thunder sect, such a person is rare. Unfortunately, he offended my Swallow Thunder Ridge. While speaking, Jinmiao waved his hand and a flying sword talisman appeared in his hand. He then waved it, and the flying sword shot like lightning toward Xiaohua, who couldn't move in the slightest under the pressure of the two cultivators. That's all there is to it. Jinhao laughed. Fourth senior brother, you speak so highly of this little thief, but in the end, he's only an aura refining junior. Today you and I, two foundation establishment cultivators, are attacking at the same time. It's like the strong bullying the weak. Humph, if it weren't for the fact that we were afraid of being leaked, we would have let you come alone. Jin Miao's eyes shone with a cold light. His fat face squeezed his eyes into the size of mung beans as he looked at the flying sword talisman that was about to pierce Xiaohua's chest. But just as the two of them decided to have a card up their sleeve, a sudden change occurred. Xiaohua, who was firmly suppressed by the pressure of the two foundation establishment cultivators, didn't struggle with all his might like they had imagined. Instead, after his initial futile struggle, his face became gloomy and he stared fixedly at the two cultivators, as if he was thinking about something. When the flying sword talisman was about to pierce his chest, a cold light flashed through Xiaohua's eyes. The true qi in his body rapidly circulated, and a layer of faint golden brilliance overflowed from his body. Immediately, Xiaohua's body expanded like a balloon. His two big hands were more than twice as big as before. His right hand reached forward, and the flying sword talisman was caught by his big hand like a swimming fish. With a clang, the flying sword talisman pierced Xiaohua's faint golden hand, and several sparks burst out. Xiaohua didn't seem to be in any pain. Then, he clenched his hand, and after a burst of metallic sound, a tattered talisman paper floated down from his hand. Ah! Jin Miao and Jin Miao were stunned. They urged their pressure again, wanting to suppress Xiaohua. But at this time, although Xiaohua was afraid of pressure, he was far from being completely suppressed like before. He still had the strength to move. How is this possible? Jin Miao shook his head in disbelief. He had never seen an aura-refining cultivator who wasn't afraid of pressure. This was the difference in realm, the natural restraint of high-grade cultivators over low-grade cultivators. Go! Jin Miao didn't hesitate and flew away from Jin Miao's side. He stopped on the other side of Xiaohua, and with a wave of his hand, a wheel-shaped magic tool appeared in the air. This was Jin Miao's magic tool, the Four Phases Wheel. The Four Phases Wheel had 4 protrusions. As Jin Miao released them, each protrusion emitted a peculiar brilliance. As it rotated, it smashed towards Xiaohua's faint golden body that was already 6 meters tall. Oh no, this seems to be a kind of divine ability. It's not the expansion of Xiaohua's body. Seeing Jin Miao throw out the magic tool, Jin Miao's heart felt a little more at ease. Only after scanning with his divine sense did he realize that Xiao Hua's faint golden body was a Dharma idol, not a real body. Moreover, most of the Dharma idol was blurry, with only a faint golden outline. Only the 2 arms and 2 legs could be seen clearly. Go! Xiao Hua, who was urging the great strength Vajra Dharma idol, saw the light of the 4 phases wheel stirring the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and a small vortex formed in the air. He knew that this magic tool was powerful. Without hesitation, the great strength Vajra Dharma idol turned slightly, clenched his left hand into a fist, and met the attack head-on. Bang! With a loud sound, the 4 phases wheel was knocked back, and a piece of Xiao Hua's Dharma idol's fist was also cut off. Oh no! Not only was Xiao Hua slightly surprised, but Jin Miao also secretly cursed in his heart. He never thought that his magic tool would be knocked back by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's heart ached even more for the great strength Vajra Dharma idol that he had painstakingly condensed. Then, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He slapped his forehead, and the cloud-suppressing seal appeared in the air. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal appeared, it immediately showed the power of a magic tool. A buzzing sound immediately filled the air, and along with the noise, the cloud-suppressing seal rapidly grew from a size of 3 inches to a size of 3 meters. All the spiritual chi of heaven and earth and the surroundings was attracted to it, and a lot of spiritual chi even formed a ribbon around the cloud-suppressing seal. What a magic tool! Jin Miao and Jin Miao praised in their hearts when they saw this. Ha ha! Since I am here, I naturally have a way to deal with you. It's just a magic tool. Jin Miao laughed, patted his storage bag, and took out a cloud-like magic tool. He casually threw it into the air. Then Jin Miao clenched his right hand into a fist and punched himself in the chest. Poof! A mouthful of blood rushed out and hit the magic tool. The cloud was instantly dyed red, but then the blood entered the magic tool, and it returned to its original white color. Let me show you the 100-layer cloud mountain of my Thunder Swallow Ridge! Jin Miao shouted loudly, and even called out the name of Thunder Swallow Ridge. He pointed his finger, and a spell was sent into the 100-layer cloud mountain. A huge suction force was generated from the 100-layer cloud mountain, and in an instant, more than half of Jin Miao's spiritual chi was sucked away. The 100-layer cloud mountain, which had absorbed the spiritual chi, suddenly expanded to a size of several hundred meters. The pure white brilliance was like a real cloud, and it covered the 3 of them. Thunder Swallow Ridge! Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. He even called out the name of the 100-layer cloud mountain. Today, he must be prepared to die. So, while sneering, he pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal whizzed toward Jin Miao. Humph! At this time, the 3 of them were under the 100-layer cloud mountain. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal coming down, Jin Miao sneered and pointed his finger. A white cloud appeared above Jin Miao's head, blocking the falling cloud-suppressing seal. Poof! The cloud-suppressing seal smashed into the white cloud, and it was as if it fell into cotton. Ha! Before Xiao Hua could react, Jin Miao was the first to laugh. His gaze swept over Jin Miao, and at Jin Miao's face also showed a relaxed expression. He pointed his finger at the 4-phase wheel, and that magic tool spun rapidly. It also made a buzzing sound, and the 4 colors of brilliance mixed together, stirring up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and flew toward Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's face was calm as he stood in the air, and he didn't appear to be surprised. He only looked at the 2 foundation establishment cultivators on his left and right, and thought to himself. He was now an aura-refining cultivator, and his body didn't have any spiritual pressure. The spiritual pressure of 2 foundation establishment cultivators was his nemesis. If he didn't have the Vajradharma body, he really wouldn't be able to handle it. Now, he could only release his Dharma body to resist the spiritual pressure. Fortunately, the Vajradharma body was a Buddhist divine ability, and he didn't need to use too much spiritual chi. Damn it! This young master's cultivation is now at the 15th layer of aura refining, and I've also cultivated the prairie fire cultivation technique to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Why would I be afraid of you? Contempt grew in Xiaohua's heart, and he coldly snorted. He urged the spiritual qi in his body, and pointed his finger at the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal produced a powerful suction force, and at the same time it sucked in Xiaohua's spiritual qi, it also swept away all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surrounding Tenjiang. Rise. Xin Miao was slightly startled, and he hurriedly chanted an incantation to urge the 100-layer cloud mountain, and the clouds blocking the cloud-suppressing seal became even thicker. -8. Chapter 1679. Contrary to Zhenming's expectations, the cloud-suppressing seal not only didn't expand as he expected, but instead seemed to shrink at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it shrank to the size of a foot. Then, as Xiaohua cast the spell, the cloud-suppressing seal actually broke free from the clouds and whistled towards the four symbols wheel. Humph, an aura-refining disciple, it's already good that you can drive a magic weapon, but you actually dare to collide directly with I. You simply don't know how to write the word death. Xinhao saw Xiaohua's magic weapon rapidly shrinking and thought that Xiaohua's magic power was insufficient to maintain the magic weapon, so he shrank it to the size of a foot, wanting to fight to the death with him. While sneering, he sent his magic power into the four symbols wheel to drive the magic weapon, wanting to smash the cloud-suppressing seal away. Pun! A deafening sound rang out. The 1-foot-long suppressing cloud seal smashed onto the 3-foot-long four phases wheel. The four colors of brilliance on the four phases wheel suddenly flourished, like sharp swords piercing through the horizon, separately rushing towards the suppressing cloud seal. The suppressing cloud seal's bronze brilliance faintly flowed, forcibly suppressing these brilliances, compressing them inch by inch. By the time the sound rang out, the suppressing cloud seal had already completely suppressed the brilliance of the four phases wheel within the artifact. Immediately, while the sound was still lingering in the ears of the three people, the brilliance of the four symbols wheel suddenly converged, revealing its original body. It was actually smashed by the cloud-suppressing seal that was much smaller than it. Pooh! As the four symbols wheel was smashed, Zhenhao, who was not far away, spat out a mouthful of blood, his face pale gold. Ah! Zhenming, who was on the other side of Xiaohua, was greatly alarmed. He waved his hand, a fiery red brilliance flashed, and a 1-foot-long spear-like magic weapon flew out of his hand, like a meteor flying towards Xiaohua's back. Xiaohua had already released his Buddhist sense, how could he not pay attention to it? He only saw his hand point, and the cloud-suppressing seal buzzed, slightly raised, and smashed towards Zhenhao. At the same time, Xiaohua's mighty Vajra slightly leaned to the side, his left fist clenched at the same time, smashing towards the spear-like magic weapon. Good! Is this still an aura-refining cultivator? Zhenming almost didn't dare to believe his own eyes. Xiaohua was really too ferocious. He was facing two foundation establishment cultivators by himself, and at this moment, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, Xiaohua had actually directly used a magic treasure and an unknown Dharma body to forcefully resist a foundation establishment magic artifact. Zhenhao, who was not far away, did not have the time to be as shocked as Zhenming. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal was lifted, he felt an unparalleled deterrent force from the magic treasure. This deterrent force was more powerful than the pressure of a gold course stage cultivator. It directly pressed into the depths of his soul, making him feel that he could not resist, could not avoid, and could not break free. Zhenhao didn't even try to resist, but he was already filled with despair. This made his heart tremble. Furthermore, his magical item had been knocked away by the cloud-suppressing seal, so it was temporarily disconnected from his mind. He couldn't control it, so he could only make a final struggle. He waved his hand, took out a dozen yellow talismans, and threw them at the cloud-suppressing seal. Using a yellow talisman against a magic treasure was the biggest joke in the world. As soon as those yellow talismans revealed their power, they were immediately turned into talisman paper under the might of the cloud-suppressing seal. One after another they fluttered down, just like the endless disdain in Xiaohua's eyes. Just as the traces of blood flowing out of the bronze cloud-suppressing seal were about to smash into Jinhao's body, a snow-white light burst out from Jinhao's body. That snow-white light was extremely dazzling. It actually made Xiaohua's eyes twitch, and he couldn't help but squint. Under the suppression of the cloud-suppressing seal, a layer of white armor appeared on Jinhao's body. The armor was obviously damaged, and could only cover Jinhao's back. Even so, the talismans flowing on the armor emitted a white light, protecting Jinhao's entire body. The light blocked the cloud-suppressing seal's front, firmly blocking the bronze light of the cloud-suppressing seal. No matter how the cloud-suppressing seal rolled, it could not fall down. A protective magic artifact! Xiaohua cried out involuntarily. He should have thought about it. Since Jinmeng could take out a magic artifact to contend with his cloud-suppressing seal, how could Jinhao not have one? After all, Thunder Mountain Ridge was the place where Thunderquake Palace refined artifacts. Seeing that his MO cloud armor had successfully blocked the cloud-suppressing seal in midair, Jinhao couldn't help but let out a long breath. However, his heart didn't seem to relax, because the shock from the cloud-suppressing seal didn't lessen in the slightest because of the MO cloud armor's appearance. At the same time, Jinmeng's magic artifact flew behind Xiaohua. Xiaohua cried out in alarm and urged his avatar's fist to smash the spear-shaped magic artifact with a bang. An unparalleled force was generated, and Jinmeng's heart was also shaken. His magic artifact was also sent flying by Xiaohua's avatar. Too powerful! Jinmeng controlled the magic artifact with great difficulty. When he controlled the magic artifact to turn around again, he actually wanted to retreat. But just as Jinmeng thought of retreating, Xiaohua made another move that puzzled him. Xiaohua's figure suddenly moved. It really was the awakening thunder escape that he suspected. A shadow that even divine sense couldn't capture flashed by, and Xiaohua actually flew in front of Jinhao. Seeing Xiaohua's sinister smile approaching, Jinhao retreated in panic as if he had encountered a rogue virgin. But how could Xiaohua allow him to retreat? He thickened his face and moved his mouth closer. As Xiaohua's figure approached, his avatar also moved. The pale golden left hand opened and grabbed the tumbling cloud-suppressing seal in midair. Then, with a flip of his hand, he actually smashed the cloud-suppressing seal towards Jinmeng. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal flew away, the shock that shocked Jinhao disappeared. While Jinhao was puzzled, he didn't hesitate and urged his flying technique to escape from Xiaohua's eyes. Still want to run? Xiaohua's face showed an inexplicable smile. As he spoke, he spat out a red and green sword light, which pierced towards Jinhao's face faster than lightning. Flying sword talisman? Seeing the sword light, Jinhao's heart lightened for no reason. He knew that this MO cloud armor was a magic artifact. How could a flying sword talisman pierce through it? However, when the sword light appeared, a kind of shock similar to the cloud-suppressing seal appeared from the depths of his heart. Not good! Before Jinhao could think of anything else, the green and red sword light pierced the MO cloud armor. Break! Xiaohua shouted softly. The white light of the MO cloud armor was indeed pierced like a bubble by the sword light. The green and red sword light instantly pierced Jinhao's face. Too fast! Too fast! This was Jinhao's last bit of emotion. He almost only had the chance to think before his vision turned black. He didn't have any time to resist, even if he took out some useless yellow talismans or other magic artifacts. At the same time that Jinhao died, the cloud-suppressing seal thrown by Xiaohua's mighty Vajra avatar also arrived in front of Jinmeng. At this time, Jinmeng had just controlled his magic artifact. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal flying towards him, he also had the same shock as Jinhao. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and a layer of pure white clouds appeared in front of him. The 100-layer cloud mountain blocked the karmic power of the cloud-suppressing seal. Strange! This is... Jinmeng and Jinhao didn't understand why this shock came from their souls. They could only use the 100-layer cloud mountain's power to protect themselves. I'm afraid it's time to retreat. Jinmeng sighed in his heart. He raised his eyes to look at Jinhao. As a result, a shocking scene appeared. Because Xiaohua was tall and thin, blocking Jinhao, Jinmeng couldn't clearly see what happened over there. However, Jinhao's floating corpse and Xiaohua's sudden turn told him that an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator from Swallow Thunder Ridge had been killed by a late-stage qi refining disciple from Myriad Thunder Valley. This? Jinmeng was slightly stunned. He didn't have time to think anymore. He didn't have time to control his magic artifact. He urged his body to use the flight technique to escape. But just as he was about to run, the cloud-suppressing seal had already smashed in front of him. The cloud-suppressing seal was blocked by the 100-layer cloud mountain before. This time, Jinmeng didn't dare to be careless. When he turned around, he still pointed his finger. Magic power flowed everywhere, and another layer of white clouds appeared in front of him to block. Puff, puff, puff. 3 or 4 muffled sounds rang out. The cloud-suppressing seal that was blocked just now was now like a hot knife through butter. In an instant, it pierced through many clouds and fiercely appeared on Jinmeng's back. This is bad. Jinmeng's face was ashen. His heart was like dead ashes. Even his magic treasure, the 100-layer cloud mountain, was broken. How could his body's defense resist? Sure enough, before the cloud-suppressing seal could reach him, a burst of brilliance flashed on Jinmeng's body. All of his defenses were crushed. Puff! The cloud-suppressing seal lightly hit Jinmeng's back. The sound was extremely soft, and the force wasn't strong either. It was only a little bit stronger than a lover's caress. But it was this kind of force that actually shattered Jinmeng's soul. Jinmeng's body was like a fluttering autumn leaf, helplessly floating down. Phew! Seeing that Jinmeng was also struck down by the cloud-suppressing seal, Xiaohua let out a long sigh. His face suddenly turned dark red. Without thinking, he hurriedly withdrew the mighty Vajra Dharma into his body. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew above his head to protect him. Then, he sat down cross-legged and activated the prairie fire mental cultivation method. The true energy in his meridians began to flow along them. After the time it took to eat a meal, Xiaohua's complexion slightly improved. But Xiaohua didn't dare to delay any longer. He released his Buddhist awareness. Seeing that there were no more movements around him, he waved his hand and put away the cloud-suppressing seal. Then, he landed on the ground and collected Jinmeng and Jinhao's storage pouches and magic treasures. He used the true Samadhi fire to destroy their corpses. Then, he flew into the air and prepared to fly towards the eastern ridge. But after flying for a few hundred feet, Xiaohua stopped again. He lowered his head and looked for a long time. Then, he landed on the small mountain below and pondered for a while. After a few hand seals, a few formation flags and a formation plate appeared at the mountain stream. Humph, to deal with a qi refining disciple like me, you still need to set up a formation? You really don't have enough shame, Xiaohua sneered. With a wave of his hand, many things were stored into the space. Then, he flew into the air. At the same time, outside of a secret hall within the Thunderclap Palace, a bright light suddenly flashed at the entrance of the hall. A gold core stage cultivator frowned as he revealed himself. He looked at the hall in front of him and whispered, "Which disciple is this? There are actually people who have lost their lives outside." -8. Chapter 1680. Xiaohua flew back to the eastern ridge herb garden, but he didn't dare to be distracted. Not only did he release his divine sense, but he also released his Buddhist sense from time to time, for fear of encountering another hidden formation. Although the life and death battle just now seemed very short, it was incomparably dangerous. Even now, Xiaohua's heart was still thumping wildly. Those were 2 early Foundation establishment seniors. He really didn't expect that he would be able to kill them without any mishap. While his heart was beating fast, Xiaohua also felt an inexplicable sense of ecstasy. He had just reached the 15th layer of qi refining. If he really reached the 18th layer of Qi refining and then entered Foundation Establishment, would he be able to kill late Foundation Establishment cultivators? Naturally, Xiaohua couldn't help but think with lingering fear. The pressure of a Foundation Establishment cultivator is too strong. Qi refining disciples are definitely not their match, and late Foundation Establishment cultivators are even more so. Even if I have the great strength Vajradharma body and can resist the pressure, I'm afraid it won't work against late Foundation Establishment cultivators. Moreover, in the fight just now, my magic power was also exhausted. It seems, the quality of my true Qi is still inferior to true essence. Even if I reach the 18th layer of Qi refining, it still can't compare to the true essence of a late Foundation Establishment cultivator. Of course, I don't know what true essence is like after Foundation Establishment. Furthermore, the reason why I was able to kill those 2 Foundation Establishment cultivators from Swallow Thunder Ridge was mainly because of the Cloud Suppressing Seal and the Dream Slayer. After 5 years of tempering, the Cloud Suppressing Seal is a lot more powerful than before, especially after condensing. Its power is even greater, catching them off guard. The Dream Executor is even more out of this young master's expectations. The immeasurable karmic fire and Tai Green Qi at the same time really are incomparably sharp. After flying for more than 2 hours, Xiaohua arrived at the eastern ridge. After checking that there were no flaws in the formation, he opened it and went in. Then, he checked the herb garden again, activated the green leaf fire formation, and returned to his Immortal's cave with peace of mind. Jin Meng and Jin Hao had a lot of things in their storage bags. Not only were there Spirit Dawn and Spirit Stones, there were also a lot of refining materials. Xiaohua didn't hesitate to put all of them into his space. Then, he picked up a few jade slips and checked them one by one. After Xiaohua finished reading through these jade slips, a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. With a shake of his hand, he shot out a few strands of Samadhi True Flame, burning the 2 storage pouches, as well as the tokens and other items that he did not take out from the storage pouches. He said with a smile. 2 ruffians from Swallow Thunder Ridge actually had the intention to kill me. I'm afraid you guys wouldn't have thought of it, right? You guys just gave me the refining method for nothing. I was just thinking about how to refine the sword embryo, and now you're giving me the manual. I really don't know how to thank all of you. When he thought up to here, Xiaohua's heart jolted, and his Buddhist consciousness swept through the heart of the Buddha's relic. Sure enough, the boundless karmic fire within it was slightly exuberant, and it was precisely the karmic fire from killing the 2 of them. Since this immeasurable hellfire is my karma, I'm afraid it has other uses other than tempering spiritual swords. I've read so many ancient books in the library, but why haven't I seen any records of the Buddhist sect? There's such a karmic fire within the Buddha's relic. If I don't take precautions, maybe I'll be burned by it. Thinking about Jin Hao and Jin Xing's helpless appearance under the 2 magic treasures, Xiaohua knew how powerful the immeasurable hellfire was. Naturally, he had to make plans for himself first. I forgot that Jin Xie and Qin Mingwei both went to the Buddhist sect in advance, and I haven't checked their jade slips. Could it be? However, Qin Mingwei's storage pouch was burned, and not a single jade slip was left behind. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Thinking up to here, Xiaohua took out the jade slips he obtained from Jin Xie. After looking through these jade slips, Xiaohua's eyes revealed a trace of joy. It turned out that not only did Qin Mingwei find the contents of the Buddhist sect's ruins, Jin Xie had also obtained them, and the records were very detailed. There were several layers of the ruins, and what kind of restrictions there were in each layer. If it weren't for the fact that the location of the Buddhist sect's ruins was not recorded in this jade slip, Xiaohua would have been able to enter with this jade slip. This is strange. Since Jin Xie also had this thing, how could he fall into Qin Mingwei's trap? Xiaohua scratched his head and said inwardly, I'm afraid he only found it later? Xiaohua's thought was wrong. This jade slip originally belonged to Qin Mingwei, but the 2 of them obtained the exquisite derivation pagoda in the Buddhist sect's ruins. Since the exquisite derivation pagoda was handed over to Qin Mingwei for safekeeping, this jade slip naturally fell into Jin Xie's hands. As for why the Buddhist sect's ruins were not recorded, Jin Xie and Qin Mingwei had already died, so Xiaohua didn't have a place to ask. Forget it, with this thing, this young master actually has some confidence in the Buddhist sect's ruins. If Senior Han Zhu really wants me to go there, my courage will also increase by a bit. Xiaohua smiled as he put away the jade slip, preparing to properly memorize it if he had the opportunity in the future. At this time, it was still early before the appointed time, so Xiaohua didn't go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library. On one hand, he continued to refine the fire essence flame crystal, but on the other hand, he took out the qi refining jade slips from the space. From easy to difficult, he looked through them bit by bit. Refining tools was similar to refining pills, but different materials were condensed together using true fire. Of course, compared to refining pills, refining tools was different. Refining pills used true fire to refine pills was a slow fire, condensing the fine into the long, tempering out the impurities in the medicinal herbs. Then, with pill techniques, using the principles of monarch and minister, yin and yang, the different medicinal liquids were condensed into pills. This process was very mysterious, somewhat similar to the qi refining, foundation establishment, and core formation of cultivators. Therefore, it was also the most difficult type of refining. Refining tools, on the other hand, used martial fire to refine. It paid particular attention to fierceness and roughness, refining out the impurities in the qi refining materials, improving the quality of the materials. Then, just like refining pills, all kinds of materials were condensed together to condense magic tools. Among them, the materials, the method of condensing, and the embedded array were the key to the success of the magic tool. At the same time, it was also the foundation of the difference in quality. The same materials in the hands of different refiners could be divided into several grades, and could even be divided into magic tools and magic treasures. Of course, Xiaohua wasn't preparing to refine tools. What he was thinking was only how to repair damaged magic treasures, and how to successfully refine the sword embryo. Xiaohua originally thought that Sun Shu's message would come again very soon, but who would have thought that half a year would quickly pass, and Xiaohua's cultivation would enter the early stage of the 16th layer of the qi refining realm without any disturbances, and Sun Shu also didn't send any more messages. Could it be that senior sister Sun Shu has changed her mind again? Xiaohua sat upright on the cloud bed in the cave, stretched his waist, and moved his muscles and bones, very satisfied as he thought to himself. The progress of his cultivation was completely dependent on the fire essence flame crystal, and it didn't matter much whether he went out to gain experience or not. If it wasn't for the fact that he had already promised someone at the Feather Immortal gathering, he wouldn't have let go of the good time to cultivate. After resting for a moment, Xiaohua flew out of the cave and looked around. At this time, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the eastern mountain range was even more tyrannical. The fire-type spiritual qi flowed wantonly, as if it was filled with violent emotions. Even the climate was somewhat hot, and many spiritual herbs had withered. Sigh, what exactly is going on here? Xiaohua squatted down and looked at a withered spiritual herb. He thought helplessly. This is obviously because too much fire-type spiritual qi was poured in, and the water-type spiritual qi was insufficient. But why wasn't it so powerful 5 years ago? Then, Xiaohua's heart shook. Could it be because of the fire essence flame crystal? But he immediately denied it. He was very clear that he had refined the fire essence flame crystal twice in the eastern mountain range, and every time, he had absorbed all the flames derived from the fire essence flame crystal into his body. This absorption was not controlled by him. His physical body, meridians, and bones were all actively absorbing the spiritual qi, leaving him only 10 to 20% for cultivation. No wonder no one dares to come here. This kind of tyrannical spiritual qi of heaven and earth, no one can smoothly absorb it into their body. They can't cultivate qi, and they can't even build their foundation. Xiaohua straightened up, and his Buddhist awareness swept out. After observing for a long time, his expression changed slightly, and his figure floated up, flying towards a place where the fire-type spiritual qi was the most unstable. Eh? This is the place where I used the fire essence flame crystal that day. Xiao Hua stopped and looked at the traces of his earlier melting on the mountain and the destruction he had caused. He thought very strangely. Then, Xiao Hua clapped his hands, and the cloud-suppressing seal was used again. With a bang, it smashed into the ground, and the mountain within a radius of 1 zhang caved in, completely destroying the traces of the flames. After putting away the magic treasure, Xiao Hua extended his Buddhist awareness and looked underground. Unfortunately, even when he used his Buddhist awareness to its limit, there were still no clues. Strange, Xiao Hua put away his Buddhist awareness, but he didn't know that about 1,000 zhang underground, the collapsed space was wrapped in melted liquid, quietly staying underground. It was unknown how many zhang it had floated up compared to before. And about 100 zhang underground, there was also a layer of formation that Xiao Hua's Buddhist awareness could not detect, covering the entire eastern mountain range. Then, Xiao Hua simply didn't go back to his cave. He found a place to sit down and began to cultivate. Another 10 days passed like this. Xiao Hua suddenly opened his eyes, knowing that there was movement outside the formation. He used the token to open the formation, and 2 crimson-red messaging talismans flew in. Both came from Sunlei Palace. One was from Sun Shu, and the other was naturally from Xue Xue. Xiao Hua crushed Xue Xue's messaging talisman, and Xue Xue's resentful voice came from it. It turned out that Xue Xue knew there was a chance to build her foundation this time, but she didn't know whether Xiao Hua would go or not. She was also afraid of distracting Xiao Hua and delaying his cultivation, so she didn't dare to rashly send a message. Moreover, a few years ago, the messaging talisman she sent to Xiao Hua often couldn't be sent, so she didn't send one. Until today, when she received her master's order to go into seclusion to cultivate, she heard from Sun Shu that Xiao Hua agreed to go with them, so she sent a message. Xue Xue's words were full of exhortations, and she didn't complain in the slightest, but Xiao Hua still felt uneasy. He explained the whole story clearly, and only said that he originally didn't have any plans. He didn't expect that he would fail to build his foundation, so he could only accompany Sun Shu and send out the messaging talisman. Sun Shu's message was simple. He only said that after 3 days, they would meet at Sky Thunder Peak. There wasn't a single extra word. After replying to Sun Shu's message, Xiao Hua thought for a moment and decided to go to Myriad Thunder Valley to bid farewell to his master. Thus, he sealed the formation of the Eastern Mountain Range Medicine Garden and flew to Myriad Thunder Valley. -8. Chapter 1681. On Sky Thunder Peak, Xiao Hua watched as the aura-refining disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect left the mountain gate not far from him in groups or by themselves. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. Foundation establishment. Alas, only foundation establishment can truly set foot on the path of cultivation. Aura refining is nothing more than wandering outside the door of cultivation. Who knows how many cultivators there are on this Xiaoyu continent, but how many of them can build their foundation? Think about those individual cultivators, think about how the heavens abandoned them in the past. Everyone has an unyielding story, everyone has a legend of resistance. However, the Tao of Heaven is so cruel. Even if you work hard, even if you pay with your life, you may not necessarily gain anything. The Tao of Heaven rewards the diligent, but immortal fate is hard to find. Alas, if you can't build your foundation, if you can't condense your gold core, all your painstaking cultivation, all your efforts, will turn into flowing water, covered by the vicissitudes of time. Xiao Hua watched the many cultivators leave. His heart was filled with sorrow, and he thought of the matter in Myriad Thunder Valley a few days ago. As Xiao Hua expected, Wu Xian wasn't in Myriad Thunder Valley's Immortal's cave. Even though Master's wife Shui Minghui sent him a Thunderlight sound-transmitting talisman, Wu Xian still didn't reply, not even a single word. Shui Minghui said Wu Xian was busy and didn't have time, but how could Xiao Hua not know Wu Xian's thoughts? Although he said he didn't care, he still felt some regret in his heart. Immediately after, Xiao Hua stayed in Xian Yang's Immortal's cave for a few days. Xiang Yang and Yan Qinglian reminded him of some matters regarding the experiential learning. There were many matters that were repeated over and over again for fear that Xiao Hua wouldn't remember. When Zhou Minghui found out that Xiao Hua went out with Sun Shu, an indescribable smile appeared on her face, making Xiao Hua look really embarrassed. He wanted to explain something, but he didn't know where to start, so he simply ignored her. It was only a few hours ago that Xiao Hua bid farewell to Xian Yang. After obtaining some medicinal pills and reporting to Thunder Palace, he hurriedly rushed over to Sky Thunder Peak. He originally thought that he was already late, but after waiting for a long time, Sun Shu still hadn't arrived. Could it be that something happened again? Xiao Hua was somewhat impatient. He was standing at the side of the Crimson Road on Sky Thunder Peak. Many aura-refining disciples were passing by in front of him. This was a very normal thing, but Xiao Hua didn't expect that his current reputation was actually not any worse than Xiang Yang's. Out of the 10 disciples who walked past him, 4 or 5 of them looked at him with contempt, while the other 5 or 6 looked at him with pity and sympathy. It was even to the extent that some disciples were gesticulating and saying in low voices, "Look, that's Xiao Hua that was renowned throughout Dawn Rain Continent during the last Feather Immortal meet. Do you know? At that time, he was incomparably awe-inspiring. He forced a great Circle Chi refinement disciple of the Huanhua sect to enter the Foundation establishment stage and took one of the Taiqing sect's treasures for himself. Such a famous person, started building his foundation as soon as he came back from the Feather Immortal Assembly. In the end, Heavenly Law bumped into a knot, and Foundation establishment failed. Yes, I know. It's him who made the #1 beauty of the Huanhua sect, Fairy Hong Xia, and her senior brother fall out. The 2 of them joined forces to force that unlucky guy out of the Feather Immortal Assembly. Look at this guy. He doesn't have any grand appearance. He's much worse than I. How did he enter the eyes of a beauty? You guys still don't know. It was actually the observing disciple of the Thunder Palace who said that the signs of this guy building his foundation that day were very frightening. They weren't inferior to the signs of core formation at all. That disciple was scared to death. He had never seen such a scene before. But the moment he built his foundation, the signs suddenly disappeared. It disappeared in a very strange way. He's a loose cultivator. When he first entered my Imperial Thunder sect, he already practiced 4 or 5 cultivation methods. Even if this kind of disciple's magic power is heavenly, it's impossible for him to build his foundation. Motherfucker. Xiao Hua's sword-like eyebrows rose as he thought to himself. Is there a need for this? What does it have to do with you whether I build my foundation or not? How can you little sparrows understand my lofty ambitions? Aren't you also not building your foundation? Is there a need for the pot calling the kettle black? Xiao Hua. A very unfamiliar voice rang out from behind Xiao Hua. When Xiao Hua turned around to look, a middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator walked down from the Sky Thunder Peak. Xiao Hua stared blankly, but he didn't dare to be negligent. He hurriedly stepped forward and bowed in greeting. Disciple Xiao Hua greets Martial Uncle. What business does Martial Uncle have? You don't recognize me? That cultivator had a fair and clean face and was slightly short. He was more than a head taller than Xiao Hua. His eyes looked at Xiao Hua as he asked coldly. Xiao Hua stared blankly. He carefully looked at that cultivator's face and still shook his head. Forgive me for my poor eyesight, but I really don't recognize Senior. I'm a disciple of Swallow Thunder Ridge. Last time when you came to the Thunder Palace with Xiang Yang, I saw you. Swallow Thunder Ridge? When Xiao Hua heard this, his heart shrunk. However, the expression on his face didn't change in the slightest. He smiled apologetically and said, So it's Martial Uncle from Swallow Thunder Ridge. The last time I went to the Thunder Palace with eldest senior brother was already many years ago. Moreover, there were many seniors from Swallow Thunder Ridge that day. I really don't remember many. Senior, please bestow me a name. I'm Junihong. That cultivator stared straight at Xiao Hua. He kept looking at Xiao Hua's eyes as if he wanted to see something. Xiaohua naturally didn't back down. He very innocently bowed. Disciple greets Martial Uncle Jin. If you're not looking for me, then why are you looking for me? What's the matter? Naturally, I'm asking if you've seen the two missing disciples of my Swallow Thunder Ridge. Jinihong suddenly sped up his speech. Two missing disciples of Swallow Thunder Ridge? Xiaohua's face turned cold. He looked left and right and said in a low voice, Martial Uncle Jin, when did this happen? I've been standing here for 2 hours. What do the two missing disciples of Swallow Thunder Ridge look like? It's possible that I've seen them. Could it be that the other sects are making some moves against my Imperial Thunder sect? If that's the case, I'd better inform the sect master as soon as possible. With so many aura refining disciples going out to gain experience, I'm afraid they've fallen into someone else's trap. Cunning! I'm asking about Jinhao and Jinming. Jinihong's expression suddenly changed. He released his pressure and directly pressed down on Xiaohua. Ah! Xiaohua's face turned pale. He hurriedly raised his hands and waved them, shouting with all his might. Martial Uncle Jin! Martial Uncle Jin! Unfortunately, under the pressure of a Middle Foundation establishment cultivator, Xiaohua, a late 12th layer aura refining cultivator, didn't seem to have any power to resist. Even waving his hands was difficult. Similarly, there were still many aura refining disciples on the mountain path at the foot of Sky Thunder Peak. When Jinihong released his pressure, the nearby disciples also felt it. They were all like Xiaohua. Their faces were pale, and they stood blankly on the mountain path. There were even a few whose cultivation levels weren't high enough and directly collapsed on the ground. I'll kill you right now! I don't care if you've seen my two junior brothers or not! Jinihong's face revealed a ferocious expression. His hands formed a seal, and the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth was pulled, smashing towards Xiaohua. Looking at the murderous aura in Jinihong's eyes, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed. His mind raced. Jinihong's pressure was heavy, but if he released the diamond strength Dharma body, he might be able to resist. However, if he did so, he would be exposed. At this moment, countless aura refining disciples on Sky Thunder Peak were watching. However, if he didn't resist, Jinihong might really kill him. How could the life of an aura refining disciple, especially one who failed to enter the Foundation Establishment realm, be feared by a Foundation Establishment cultivator? Forget it. Since Master doesn't like me, why should I stay in the Imperial Thunder sect? If I'm going to be killed like this, I might as well take the risk. Xiaohua thought. His eyes flashed coldly, and his arms moved slightly. He was about to activate the diamond strength Dharma body. In such a critical moment, the only thing he could think of was to save his own life first. Xiaohua! Another horrified voice sounded in the distance. It was Sun Shu, and there were 2 other voices shouting along with him. Hey! Where did this scoundrel come from? How dare he bully the weak on Sky Thunder Peak? How dare he bully a disciple of my myriad Thunder Valley? At the same time, Xiaohua's familiar voice rang out from afar. Immediately after, the pressure of a late-stage Foundation Establishment cultivator surged from afar, completely surrounding Jinihong. Ah! Jinihong saw that Xiaohua wanted to move, and his eyes showed a hint of joy. However, when he sensed the late Foundation Establishment cultivator's pressure, his expression changed greatly. He quickly withdrew the pressure and resisted with all his strength. When the two forces collided, a hurricane was set off. Not only were the rocks on the mountain path rolling, but many aura refining disciples were also unable to stand steadily. Senior Martial Brother! How could Jinihong's Middle Foundation Establishment cultivator resist the late Foundation Establishment cultivator's pressure? After resisting for a moment, he was mercilessly suppressed. Then, a mountain-like weight directly pressed him down on the mountain path. Jinihong felt a chill in his heart, and he couldn't help but shout. Jinihong's figure gradually appeared on the mountain path in the distance. Master! Xiaohua couldn't help but shout in his heart. Jinihong didn't seem to see Xiaohua. He walked straight to Jinihong and coldly looked at Jinihong, who was sitting on the ground and struggling to resist. He sneered and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Jin, how can a Foundation establishment cultivator be so filthy? You actually attacked a disciple of my Myriad Thunder Valley in front of so many aura-refining disciples who went out to gain experience. Don't talk about bullying the weak. If others saw this, wouldn't they say that my Lightning Palace disciples are ignorant? Senior Marshal Brother Jinihong, please withdraw your pressure," Jinihong said with a pale face. He seemed to be very afraid of Jinihong's pressure. "Humph, why would I withdraw it? Why didn't you think about it when you released your pressure?" Jinihong said that, but when he saw the countless disciples lying on the ground around him, he withdrew his pressure a little. Jinihong's face turned for the better. He rolled his eyes and said with an apologetic smile, "I was just being kind. Damn it, you wanted to kill my Myriad Thunder Valley disciple, and you were being kind," Jinihong said with a smile. "Senior Marshal Brother Jinihong, how could that be? I was just testing Xiaohua," Jinihong said with a smile. "How could I possibly kill an aura-refining disciple on Sky Thunder Peak? I just sent Junior Marshal Brother out to gain experience, and saw Xiaohua waiting here. Moreover, Senior Marshal Brother didn't come to send me off, so I came to take a look and give him a warning while I was at it. Going out to gain experience isn't like cultivating in the lightning-controlling sect. You can encounter any kind of danger. If I, as their teacher, don't give them a lot of guidance, how would they know?" -8. Chapter 1682. Of course I'll be the one to warn my disciple. It's not your turn to worry. Damn it, I'll also warn you on behalf of Marshal Uncle Jinjie and let you know what it means to bully the weak. Helplessness glared at him and said with a smile, "However, we're both in the Foundation establishment stage, so I won't be bullying you." As he spoke, he helplessly released his pressure once more. There seemed to be bursts of heavenly thunder within that pressure, and that pressure caused Jinihong to tremble with fear. His body involuntarily trembled, and he was in an even more sorry state than Xiaohua just now. In a hurry, Jinihong couldn't care less about losing face in front of the disciples. He slapped his hand and took out a magic tool from his storage bag. He urged his magic power to shine in all directions, trying to resist helplessness's spiritual pressure. Unexpectedly, just as Jinihong was about to activate his magic tool and pour all of his magic power into it to resist, the pressure suddenly disappeared. Jinihong was caught off guard, and his magic tool suddenly went out of control. A brilliant light swept past and unexpectedly rushed towards the aura-refining disciples sitting on the ground around Jinihong. "This is bad!" Seeing this, Jinihong's pale face lost even more color. He tried his best to control the magic tool and quickly withdrew his magic power. Alas! This child. Not only is he bullying the weak, but he also doesn't know how to respect the old and love the young. I was just saying. Do you really think I'll teach you a lesson? Do you really want to make a fool of yourself? You're still a Foundation establishment stage cultivator. Look at you, you actually used a magic tool. You don't have the slightest bit of compassion. Not to mention hurting the disciples, even the flowers and plants on Sky Thunder Peak are not appropriate. Helplessness suddenly smiled, and the anger on his face disappeared. He stretched out his hand and easily took back the magic tool that was attacking the disciples, cutting off the connection between the magic tool and Jinihong. Jinihong was trying his best to control the magic tool, but this sudden cut-off made him feel as if he had punched the void. Not only did he lose control of his spiritual sense, but his magic power also rushed to his meridians like a tide, and he lost control even more. Pooh! Jinihong spat out a mouthful of blood. His meridians were damaged. However, he was a Foundation establishment cultivator after all. Under the activation of his mental cultivation method, he immediately stabilized his state of mind. The true essence in his meridians flowed, and in the blink of an eye, he controlled his magic power. When he helplessly saw that Jinihong was injured, a faint smile appeared on his face. He waved his hand and the magic treasure gently floated before Jinihong, he bitterly said. Junior Marshal Brother Jin! You're not young anymore, why are you so easily angered? Take it, I'm just afraid that your magic tool will injure aura refining disciples. Look at you, do you think I want to take your magic tool? Even if you beat this old man to death, this old man will never bully the weak. You! Jinihong was truly angry, but when he looked at Xiaohua's calm expression, Xiaohua's gloating expression, Sun Shu and the others who were walking over from afar and didn't dare to approach, and the disciples with different expressions, he flicked his sleeve and put away his magic tool. He coldly glanced at Xiaohua again, then quickly walked up Sky Thunder Peak. Master, Xiaohua's face was full of smiles. He quickly walked over and bowed. Humph, I just happened to pass by. Helplessly turned around and scolded coldly. That's why I blocked it for you. Look, if you don't build your foundation, an aura-refining disciple is just a fly in the eyes of a foundation establishment cultivator. They can be destroyed with a wave of their hand. This time, if you can't build your foundation, don't come back. He didn't wait for Xiaohua to say a second word and turned around to leave. Xiaohua straightened up and bit his lip. Looking at Helplessness's back, his eyes flickered. Greetings, Martial Uncle Helplessness. When Helplessness passed by Sun Shu, Qiandihing, and Kun Fian hurriedly bowed. And Helplessness flicked his sleeve, took out a storage pouch and threw it to Sun Shu, saying, Be careful on the way. Disciple understands. Sun Shu was obviously stunned by Helplessness's storage pouch. He didn't know whether he should accept it or not. He still wanted to say something. Qiandihing hurriedly pulled Sun Shu's sleeve and cupped his hands, saying, Many thanks for Martial Uncle's good intentions. And Helplessness responded indifferently and quickly walked away. When he was far away from the mountain path, he used the hibernating thunder escape and flew away. From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Xiaohua. Sun Shu and the other two quickly walked down. When they arrived in front of Xiaohua, Xiaohua raised his head, still looking at Helplessness's disappearing figure. The aura-refining disciples around him who were frightened had already crawled up. Not a single one was left. The disciples who followed behind all had fear on their faces and stayed far away. Junior Martial Brother Xiao! Sun Shu called in a low voice, pulling Xiaohua's gaze back from the distance. Ha ha, Xiaohua, we meet again! Qiandiheng was far more affectionate than Sun Shu. He stepped forward and put his arm around Xiaohua's neck, calling out. Kun Fian's eyes flickered. He cupped his hands, saying, Greetings, Junior Martial Brother Xiao! Xiaohua's expression was strange. He slightly frowned and said with a smile, Junior greets Senior Martial Sisters and Senior Martial Brothers. Then, without leaving a trace, he brushed away Qiandiheng's arm and said with a smile, Senior Martial Brother Qian also advanced to the late stage of the 12th layer of the aura-refining realm. Congratulations. Haha, you've already built your foundation once. I'm just at the late stage of the 12th layer of the aura-refining realm. What's there to congratulate? Qiandiheng said with a laugh, not minding it at all. Sun Shu's expression slightly changed. He carefully looked at Xiaohua's expression. Xiaohua's face was completely calm. He glanced around and said, Senior Martial Brother Qian and Senior Martial Sister Kun, where are you going to train? Sun Shu clenched his silver teeth and said in a low voice, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, Junior Martial Brother Qian and Senior Martial Sister Kun are also coming with us. Huh? Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and said in surprise, Senior Martial Sister Sun, didn't you say it was just the two of us? Why did you suddenly change your mind? You also didn't mention it in your summoning talisman, right? When I sent you the summoning talisman, I indeed only planned to go with Junior Martial Brother Qian. Sun Shu looked left and right. There were still many disciples going down the mountain. Sun Shu had no choice but to transmit her voice. But later on, things changed. I had no choice but to change my mind. Moreover, Junior Martial Brother Qian and Senior Martial Sister Kun are disciples of the Heavenly Thunder Palace and the Earthly Thunder Palace. You know them both. That place, they've also heard of it. It's just that everyone doesn't have absolute strength, so they don't dare to go. They were also against it at first, but when they heard that Junior Marshal Brother Xiao was going, they decided to go. Besides, there are still many people there. It's safer there. Junior Marshal Brother Xiao, you won't not go, right? Sun Shu said in the end. There was actually a hint of pleading in her voice. Xiao Hua, you won't turn your back on Senior Marshal Brother, right? Qian Diheng had a smile on his face. He stretched out his hand and took the storage bag that Senior Marshal Brother Qian Diheng handed to her from Sun Shu. He said with a smile, Look, Senior Marshal Brother Qian Diheng entrusted you to us. If you don't go, this storage bag will be prepared for nothing. Senior Marshal Brother Qian Diheng's efforts will also be wasted. -8. Chapter 1683. Flying in the air, Xiao Hua's expression is calm. Sun Shu, Qian Diheng, and Kun Fian are flying in front. Their speed can be considered fast, but in Xiao Hua's eyes, they are not worth mentioning. Xiao Hua's face is expressionless, but he is muttering in his heart. It turns out that when Jinhao and Jinming were killed by Xiao Hua, there was a reaction in the place where the life tablets of Foundation Establishment and above disciples are placed. The master in charge of the tablets found something unusual and reported it to Thunderbolt Palace's palace master, Thunder Meng Taoist. 2 Foundation Establishment disciples can't be compared to aura refining disciples. They actually died at the same time, and after checking the report, the 2 didn't leave Imperial Thunder Sect. They were killed in Imperial Thunder Sect at the same time. This can't help but make Thunder Meng Taoist angry, and this matter is naturally reported to Heavenly Thunder Palace. Therefore, Heavenly Thunder Palace also issued an order to Thunderbolt Palace to find out the truth. Unfortunately, Imperial Thunder Sect is so big, no one knows where the 2 died. After several days of searching, there is no result. And this time is also the time when Imperial Thunder Sect's aura refining disciples go out to gain experience. For the safety of the disciples, Heavenly Thunder Palace also postponed the time to find clues. This is also the reason why Sun Shu only told Xiao Hua to set off half a year after sending the message. Although Jinhao and Jinming's disappearance is not as big as Jinxie and Kamingwei's disappearance, the masters of each Thunder Palace are still worried about their disciples going out to gain experience. They are afraid it is a scheme of Splendid Sect, Xunyan School, and other sects, so they all ask their disciples to go out together. Sun Shu is a female cultivator, and also Sun Ming's blood relative, so Sun Ming is also worried. Occasionally, when she knows that Qian Diheng and Kun Fian are also going out to gain experience, she works with their masters to gather the 3 together. Just like Sun Shu said, she is also very unwilling. That place is hidden and the key to cultivating lightning escape, how can others know? But Sun Shu thinks that since she can know, Heavenly Thunder Palace and Earth Thunder Palace's disciples may not necessarily not know. After probing, Qian Diheng and Kun Fian, who have the same background, really change their expressions. After all, that place is not a place where aura refining disciples can go. Even if it is the key to cultivating lightning escape, the 2 have never thought about going there. But what if Xiao Hua was included? Xiao Hua's strength was incomparable, and his speed was also extremely fast. He was the best candidate to go with them. Thinking about how if they had an opportunity, not only would they be able to reach the Foundation Establishment realm, but they would also be able to reach the Core Formation realm. Therefore, the 2 of them agreed after thinking about it a little. Moreover, they had also agreed to keep it a secret from their master. They had high hopes for Xiao Hua, but who would have thought that Xiao Hua didn't care at all? The lightning evasion was admittedly a metamorphosis of a lightning cultivator, but he didn't need to specialize in the lightning evasion. As long as he cultivated the light evasion to a certain level, he would naturally succeed in cultivating the lightning evasion. He didn't need to take the risk. What annoyed him the most was that the 3 of them were tight-lipped about where that place was. They were determined not to tell him. They only said that they would let him know when they reached the Earth realm. Thus, even though the 4 of them left the Sky Lightning Peak, Xiaohua remained in midair, refusing to fly half a step further. Only when Qian Dihing and the other two promised him many benefits, spoke many good words, and even brought out their helplessness, did Xiaohua relent. As long as the three of them told him where they wanted to go, he would go. Who would have thought that the three of them would also smile wryly? As it turned out, they only got the general direction of that place from their teacher. As for how to find it specifically, that was another story. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he also understood. This was a place that aura-refining disciples couldn't easily go, so how could their teacher reveal it to them? They could only know bits and pieces. In any case, he was going out to gain experience, so wasn't it fine if he went anywhere? It would be best if he couldn't find anything there, so he didn't need to take any risks. According to Sun Shu, that place is called Mingxi, one of the 10 most dangerous places in the Xiaoyu continent. It's right on the border with the Huan country. The journey will take several months. During this time, I can refine the flames in my body and cultivate the prairie fire cultivation technique. Once I'm done refining the flames, I'll use the fire essence flame crystal to advance my cultivation level to the foundation building realm as soon as possible. Xiaohua thought as he flew. Master is really ruthless. He won't let me come back until I reach the foundation building realm? Not far from Sky Thunder Peak, 4th Senior Marshal Brother Jin Weixing of Swallow Thunder Ridge stood there with a gloomy expression. Jin Yihong's expression was reserved, and he stood at the side with his hands hanging down. He occasionally raised his head to look at Jin Weixing. The other senior martial brothers behind him were also in the early stage of the foundation building realm, but they didn't dare to make a sound. 15th brother and 17th brother really did tell you they wanted to avenge youngest junior martial brother's humiliation? Jin Weixing suddenly asked. Naturally, the 2 junior martial brothers said it. Jin Yihong answered without hesitation. These words. Youngest brother said it half a year ago. But the problem is, Xiaohua was only an aura-refining disciple, he couldn't have. Jin Weixing frowned, very puzzled. But then, his whole body shook, as if he had thought of something, and an inconceivable expression appeared on his face. Seeing his 4th senior martial brother's expression, Jin Yihong's eyes also lit up, and he cried out in alarm. Yes, that's right. That Xiaohua didn't have such a cultivation, but there was someone in Myriad Thunder Valley who had such a cultivation. Could it be like today, that he had been coveting in the dark for a long time, and the 2 junior martial brothers were ambushed in haste, so they died without any news? As soon as Jin Yihong's words came out, the several disciples behind Jin Weixing came to a realization, and hatred appeared in their eyes. I only had my eyes on Eastern Ridge, and forgot about Myriad Thunder Valley. This senior martial brother helplessness has always followed the rules, and has a good reputation of being cautious and conscientious in my thunderous palace. I didn't expect him to be so scheming. Jin Weixing sneered. This matter must be known to Master. He had no choice but to guard the 10,000 Lightning Valley. Every day, he would be struck by 10,000 lightning bolts. His cultivation has been tempered to an astonishing degree. Just the pressure alone is not something that you or I can withstand, Jin Yihong said fearfully. That's right, helplessness took action. This is not a private grudge between us disciples, but a dispute between Myriad Thunder Valley and Thunderous Ridge. If Master doesn't say anything, how can we act? Jin Weixing said faintly, looking in the direction of Myriad Thunder Valley in the distance. What about Xiaohua? That guy is now out of the Imperial Thunder Sect, and without the protection of Myriad Thunder Valley, how can we just let him go? A disciple whispered. What do you think? My 6th junior martial brother, you've been in the middle stage of foundation establishment for several years now. Isn't it time for you to go out and gain experience? Jin Weixing looked at his 6th junior martial brother Jin Ming and said with a smile. However, you must be careful when you go out. Some qi-refining cultivators are still acting strangely under the pressure of a foundation establishment cultivator. You have to be careful of the dangers outside. Jin Ming slapped his head. That's right, I've been cultivating in Thunderous Ridge for a long time, but I haven't made any progress. If I don't go out and gain experience, how can I improve? I'll go back to Thunderous Ridge with you senior martial brothers, explain to Master, and report to Thunderous Palace. And if you want to go, then go quickly. Otherwise, I'm afraid it won't be easy to find a place to gain experience. Jin Weixing flicked his sleeve and said. His figure flashed, and he used the hibernating Thunder Escape to fly towards Thunderous Ridge. Xiao Hua followed the three of them and flew for a long time. Only when the sky turned dark did he slow down. Sun Shu glanced at Qian Diheng, and the two of them exchanged glances. Sun Shu turned his head and said, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, we're going to change direction. Hee, just lead the way. I'll go with you. Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. He didn't say much and followed the three of them to the north. After flying for a while, Qian Diheng slowed down and somewhat mysteriously landed next to Xiao Hua. He said in a low voice, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, Thunderous Ridge's martial uncle, why did he think of making things difficult for you? Xiao Hua touched his nose, cursing in his heart. Sun Shu and Kun Fian didn't even ask, so why the hell did you ask? Looking at Qian Diheng's mischievous smile, Xiao Hua said unhappily, How would I know? I'm afraid it's because my eldest martial brother snatched a dual cultivation partner that one of their disciples fancied, so they want to vent their anger on me? Ah? Qian Diheng stared blankly and almost fell down from the sky laughing. He held his stomach for a long time before gritting his teeth and saying, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, this is something that happened almost 50 to 60 years ago. You still have the nerve to mention it? Strange, if it's not this, then what? Xiao Hua said innocently. Could it be, they thought that the two Thunderous Ridge disciples died in my hands? You! Ha ha ha! Qian Diheng laughed so hard that he almost fell over. He pointed at Xiao Hua's nose. Those are two seniors who have built their foundation. Even if you can force Yun Xiaoyao to build her foundation, that doesn't mean you have the strength to fight against them. Don't you still have to rely on Fairy Hong Xia who has built her foundation? If you say you killed the two foundation establishment seniors, I can bet foundation establishment. Qian Diheng seemed to want to say, bet foundation establishment that Xiao Hua couldn't kill Jin Hao and Jin Ying. Xiao Hua didn't dare to let him say it. He quickly waved his hand and said, Yes, even you don't believe it. Why do you think that foundation establishment senior did it? How would I know? Qian Diheng curled his lips and said, Maybe that senior's female disciple had some awkwardness with you. Xiao Hua smiled and said, How could I have such charm? Junior Martial Brother Qian, Junior Martial Brother Xiao, it's already late. Should we rest or continue? Sun Shu stopped and asked in a low voice with an indescribable expression in her eyes. Although she was asking the two of them, her beautiful eyes were staring at Xiao Hua. Do you still need to say it? We're still in the territory of the Imperial Thunder Sect. Why are we dawdling here instead of leaving? Qian Diheng said impatiently. Xiao Hua looked at the dark clouds in the sky and shook his head. It's late and the weather isn't good. It's better to rest for the night and continue tomorrow. It's also far from Mingxi. We can't get there in 1 or 2 days. Sun Shu looked at Kun Fian. Kun Fian nodded silently in agreement. All right, we'll do as Junior Martial Brother Xiao says. Qian Diheng stretched his body helplessly. After flying for a day, I'm also tired. Meditating for a night is also good. Then the four of them landed and found a cave in the middle of the barren mountain. According to Sun Shu's idea, the four of them gathered together to meditate and cultivate. A cave could be used as much as possible. But Xiao Hua didn't let it go. He didn't go too far away either. About 30 meters away from the cave, he raised the cloud-suppressing seal and smashed open a small cave. -8. Chapter 1684. Seeing Xiao Hua actually use the cloud-suppressing seal like this, Qian Diheng's face was full of resentment. He lamented, Magic weapon on magic weapon, you are really throwing pearls before swine. This guy actually used you to make a hole. If you had a weapon spirit, wouldn't you be angered to death? You'd better quickly give birth to a weapon spirit and quickly throw yourself into I's embrace. I will definitely let you eat and drink well. Sun Shu and Kun Fian were also astonished, but hearing Qian Dihing's nagging, their mouths unconsciously revealed a smile. Their inexperienced mood was obviously relaxed. Seeing that the cave made by Xiaohua using the cloud-suppressing seal could only hold Xiaohua alone, Qian Dihing cried out strangely. Junior brother Xiao, what do you mean by this? Aren't the two of us here, resting? Xiaohua smiled and took out 3 messaging talismans from his bosom. He gave them to the two and said, Junior brother has to cultivate tonight. It's best if others don't disturb me. I won't be with senior brother Qian. This is a messaging talisman that I refined myself. If anything happens at night, you can use it to wake junior brother up. TSK. Qian Dihing glanced at Xiaohua unhappily and said, It's only a distance of 10 zhang. Won't you know if you shout? Do you need a messaging talisman? Although they said so, the 3 of them still put the talismans into their storage pouches. When the 3 of them returned to their own cave, the 2 female cultivators cleaned up the inside. Sun Shu also carefully took out some spirit fruits from his storage pouch. When Qian Dihing went out to call Xiaohua to eat, he discovered that the cave that Xiaohua had just made was already gone. Illusion array? Qian Dihing was dumbfounded. He scanned with his divine sense and actually didn't find any clues. The location of the cave was exactly the same as the one next to it. If he didn't see it with his own eyes, he really wouldn't dare to believe that there was a cave here. Junior brother Xiao. However, no matter how Qian Diheng called, Xiaohua didn't respond. It seemed that there really wasn't a cave. What's wrong? Sun Shu and Kun Fian heard the voice and came over, similarly shocked. This guy is really abominable, Qian Diheng said fiercely. He obviously has such a rare array that can protect us, but he doesn't want to share it with us. He hides in a place and uses it. Damn it, call him out. I want to have a good talk with him. As he spoke, he took out the messaging talisman that Xiaohua had given him. Junior brother Qian. Seeing this, Sun Shu hurriedly stopped him and said in a low voice, Since junior brother Xiao has done this, he naturally has his reasons. You shouldn't disturb his cultivation. If there's anything, let's talk about it tomorrow. All right. Qian Dihing looked at them helplessly and turned around to follow the 2 back. Inside the cave, Xiaohua had long since closed his eyes and focused on refining the flames in his meridians. Now that he was at the early stage of the 16th layer of qi refining, he felt that his progress was much slower than before. Therefore, he didn't want to waste any time. As soon as he entered the cave, he immediately set up the formation. He wasn't afraid of attracting the attention of Sun Shu and the others. Since he would be traveling with the 3 of them for several months, they would find out about this sooner or later. Of course, Xiaohua was helpless as well. The formation he spoke of was strange as well, and it was quite different from the formations on Dawn Rain continent. It was precisely the talisman shaped like a rabbit that he recalled in his mind a few years ago. This talisman was composed of 360 talismans, and he seemed to know the refining method. However, there was a problem during the refining process. The talisman characters of the rabbit talisman couldn't be imprinted on the talisman paper. No matter how many ideas Xiaohua thought of, he still couldn't succeed. In the end, Xiaohua had a flash of inspiration. He used the method of refining talismans to find some beast skin and beast blood in the space. Only then did he succeed in refining some of the talismans. Then, according to his memory, he set up these talismans, forming an incomplete rabbit defensive formation. Naturally, there was only 1 set of these talismans, and there wasn't a second set in the world for the time being. Therefore, Xiaohua couldn't let Qian Dihing and the others use it. As for why Xiaohua wasn't with them, looking at the countless small waves of air rising from the cave where Xiaohua was, as well as the extremely high temperature within half a foot of Xiaohua's body, it was clear that his cultivation was completely different from others. It wasn't necessary to tell others about it, While Xiaohua was cultivating, Sun Shu and the others also didn't dare to be negligent. After setting up some yellow talismans outside the cave, they also seized the time to cultivate. Although there wouldn't be any improvement in their cultivation, no one could say when the opportunity to build their foundation would arrive. The night was very gloomy. In the latter half of the night, there was a rumbling sound of thunder, and it actually started to rain. The raindrops were extremely large, extremely dense, and countless sounds entered everyone's ears. When the sky first lit up, the raindrops turned into rain lines, connecting the heaven and earth. Other than the heavy downpour, there was also the gloomy lightning and thunder in the night sky. There was no other scenery. Unfavorable start. Qian Dihing stood in front of the cave, looking at the curtain of rain, and blurted out, "Pei Pei." Kun Fei Yan immediately spat on the ground and said, "Junior brother Qian, how can you say this? Don't you think it's bad luck?" "It's just a feeling, a feeling," Qian Diheng hurriedly said. At the same time, a trace of a bad feeling arose in his heart. Immortal cultivators are most concerned about fate. Pills can be eaten carelessly, but some words can't be carelessly said. After Qian Diheng heartlessly said this, his heart was filled with regret. At this time, about 10 zhang to the left of Qian Diheng, a faint light flashed, and the outline of the cave that Xiaohua was hiding in appeared. Xiaohua flew out of the cave. "Junior brother Xiao." When Qian Diheng saw this, his face showed joy. He also flew over to Xiaohua's side. At this time, the rain was pouring down. Xiaohua and Qian Diheng stayed in the rain. There seemed to be a layer of transparent cover around their bodies, isolating them from the rain. Their robes and bodies didn't have the slightest trace of moisture. "Senior brother Qian, good morning." Xiaohua cupped his hands, looking at the dark clouds, lightning, and thunder. He shook his head and said, "This kind of weather is the power of heaven and earth. You and I cultivators are not afraid, but after all, it's not appropriate. If possible, we should stay here and wait for the rain to stop before continuing." At this time, Sun Shu and Kun Fian also flew up. According to Sun Shu's thoughts, they couldn't wait to grow a pair of wings on their back and fly to Mingxi in a flash. But Qian Diheng's words just now and Xiaohua's suggestion, Sun Shu could only sigh and nod in tacit agreement. Everyone flew down again. This time, Qian Diheng shamelessly wanted to stay with Xiaohua, wanting to see Xiaohua's array. Xiaohua had no choice but to let him in. Since Qian Diheng came, Sun Shu and Kun Fian also followed. Xiaohua could only summon the cloud-suppressing seal and expand the cave by a lot. Only then did he take out the dozen or so shiny talismans and said with a smile, "This little brother accidentally came across this thing in a marketplace. Because it was incomplete, and I didn't know the specific method to use it, it fell into this little brother's hands. TSK TSK. Qian Diheng waved his hand and many talismans fell into his hand. After looking at them carefully, he couldn't bear to put them down and said, "All the good things are yours. This is a formation talisman, not an ordinary talisman, nor an ordinary yellow talisman. It's fine if you only have 1 or 2 talismans, but you actually made a set of over 10 formation talismans. How can I not be jealous? Also, junior brother Zhao's array is also strange." Kun Fian took the talismans from Qian Diheng's hand and said with a strange light in his eyes, "The core of the array is the array plate. You didn't need the array plate to set up the array. It's really inconceivable." Xiaohua said with a smile, "This is originally an incomplete thing, otherwise how could it fall into junior brother's hands?" Then, looking at the curtain of rain outside the cave, he said in a low voice, "Also, junior brother also pondered for many years without any results. Then, by chance, I found the method to set up the array. Only then could I barely set up the array. Everything was gathered together. What you got is..." Kun Fian said half a sentence and then stopped. This was a cultivator's privacy, it was inappropriate to ask too much. But Kun Fian's eyes turned slightly and said, "According to the masters of the Earth Thunder Palace who are proficient in arrays, the arrays on the Xiaoyu continent have been lost for a long time. So now, arrays can only be set up with array plates and array talismans. And some powerful cultivators use jade talismans to set up arrays. They don't use array plates. Jade talismans? Xiaohua's eyes brightened, as if he had caught something. His rabbit talisman was also difficult to refine on talismans. Could it be that it can be refined with jade talismans? AI, don't talk about using jade talismans to set up arrays. Qian Dihing sighed and said, I can't even learn ordinary arrays. The refining of array plates and array talismans are all difficult. It's said that it's even harder than refining pills. I also don't have junior brother Zhao's good luck and can only watch from the side. As he spoke, Qian Diheng handed the talismans to Sun Shu for her to see. Sun Shu didn't seem to know much about spirit arrays. He only looked at the dozen or so spirit talismans with envy before handing them to Xiaohua. As he released his divine sense, he said, Junior brother Xiao is really lucky. These spirit talismans are rare even for the masters of my Sun Thunder Palace. Excuse me. Xiaohua took the talismans and said very embarrassedly, Ouch. Just as Xiaohua was speaking, Sun Shu frowned. His divine sense seemed to have been burned as he retracted it. He called out, This mountain is a bit strange. The heavenly lightning is unceasing, and even my divine sense is restricted. Should we? Sun Shu originally wanted to suggest leaving, but Xiaohua's divine sense also swept over and a trace of a bitter smile appeared on his face. I'm afraid it's a bit late. Qian Dihing and Kun Fian also released their divine sense slightly, and their faces changed slightly. The thunder and lightning in the sky above the mountain was even more intense. The rolling thunder was actually somewhat similar to the thunder in the 10,000 Thunder Valley. Even if the four of them were all disciples of the Imperial Thunder Sect and Qian Dihing, and the others had thunder attribute physiques, it would still be dangerous to forcibly fly away in this situation. We have no choice but to stay here. Sun Shu felt some bitterness in her mouth. It had only been a day since they left the Imperial Thunder Sect and they were actually trapped here. This was clearly not a good start. Glancing at Xiaohua, Sun Shu was a bit angry and thought to herself, If we weren't resting here, I'm afraid we would have already flown far away. Sigh. Sun Shu sighed and sat down, closing her eyes and not saying anything. Seeing that the three of them had each found a place to close their eyes and cultivate, Xiaohua could only sit down. How could he have the nerve to drive the three of them away to cultivate? Without any other choice, he could only take out a jade slip for refining tools and immerse his divine sense in it to check. -8. Chapter 1685. It was supposed to be noon, but the sky was completely dark, no different from night time. Streaks of lightning were like sharp swords striking the sky, leaving streaks of light behind. The rain was like the collapse of the heavenly river, endlessly pouring down. In less than half a day, the mountainous area where Xiaohua and the others were at had a lot of muddy water mixed with small rocks sliding down from the top of the mountain. This is too strange. Xiaohua opened his eyes and looked at the mud seeping in from the cave entrance. He didn't dare to be negligent. With a wave of his hand, he took out a dozen talismans and waved them in all directions of the cave. Seeing Xiaohua shoot out the talismans, Sun Shu and the others were surprised. Usually, they had seen their teachers set up arrays, but those array talismans were all placed on the ground without exception. However, Xiaohua's dozens of array talismans were placed on the top, bottom, left, and right, and seemed to have enveloped the entire cave. The three of them exchanged glances with each other, and there was joy in their astonishment. After all, the more Xiaohua had, the safer they would be. They rejoiced in their hearts for choosing to go with Xiaohua. Seeing that all the talismans had been shot out, Xiaohua's hand quickly formed a dozen seals. Every talisman flashed with a faint light where his magic power was activated. Rise! Xiaohua lightly scolded. He grabbed at the air with his hand, causing the spiritual energy fluctuations of more than 10 talismans to fluctuate. Qian Dihing felt the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the surroundings slightly rotate, but it immediately stopped. When he looked at Xiaohua again, he was already sitting cross-legged, motionless. Huh! Already arranged the array? Qian Diheng originally thought that there would be a big change, but when he saw that it was so calm, he was slightly disappointed. However, when he released his divine sense, he was shocked to find that his divine sense had been blocked inside the magic array and could no longer penetrate. Senior brother Qian, this spell was originally incomplete. I was able to perform it with great effort. What else do you have in mind? Xiaohua opened his eyes and said angrily. Moreover, arranging the array will consume a lot of this little brother's spiritual energy. This little brother needs to rest first. TSK. Qian Diheng looked at Xiaohua with disdain, and then he also started to work hard. Just as Xiaohua finished setting up the array, mud rushed down from the top of the cave. It pushed away the plants and rocks, destroying the cave where Sun Shu and the others were resting. Xiaohua's array was also buried under the mud. After another 2 hours, a thunderbolt suddenly appeared tens of thousands of feet above the cave. Following the bright light of the thunderbolt, a palm-sized darkness appeared. This darkness seemed to be a mark of being torn apart by the thunderbolt. Suddenly, 2 dots of light appeared in the darkness. These 2 dots of light flickered like a pair of bright eyes. Following the appearance of these 2 dots of light, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in midair began to surge rapidly and converge towards these 2 dots of light. Furthermore, an overwhelming pressure was being emitted from these 2 dots of light. In the Imperial Thunder Sect, which was closest to this place, a few deity transformation stage cultivators with plain faces opened their eyes in astonishment. Their powerful spiritual wills exchanged slightly, and at the same time, a strand of their spiritual will was separated from their bodies. These strands of spiritual will were about to fly out of the Imperial Thunder Sect. 100 miles away from the cave, a middle-stage Foundation establishment cultivator was about to fly towards the cave. However, the pressure had already been emitted. This cultivator fell from the sky, and after stabilizing his body, he no longer dared to move forward. He looked for a direction and fled in panic. At this moment, the 2 bright spots suddenly disappeared again, and a thumb-sized bottle flew out from the darkness. The pitch-black crack rapidly shrank, and in the blink of an eye, it returned to its original state. The small bottle streaked across the sky, flew to the west, and soon disappeared without a trace. Following the disappearance of the crack, the pressure also disappeared. At this moment, the Divine Transformation Cultivator's divine clones still hadn't left the Imperial Thunder Sect. Several divine clones scanned the area again. As if they had discussed this beforehand, one divine clone flew out of the Imperial Thunder Sect's forbidden area and flew towards the spot where the dots of light appeared. The other divine clones all returned to the Divine Transformation Cultivator's bodies. When the divine clone reached the spot where the dots of light appeared, apart from the boundless rain and some lightning in the dark clouds, everything returned to normal. There were no longer any abnormalities. As for the divine clone, it was like the cultivator's physical body. It was surrounded by flowing light, blocking the rain outside. Could it be a foreign spiritual treasure has descended? The divine clone muttered to himself. The buzzing sound was like muffled thunder, causing the rain to tremble. Immediately after, an incomparably powerful divine sense was sent out from the spirit clone, sweeping across the surrounding dozens of miles. Strange! There's nothing here. Could it be they've left? The divine clone frowned and looked around. His gaze seemed to be able to see through the mud and saw where Xiaohua and the others were. Why are 4 little Qi refinement cultivators here? Then, the divine clone pointed with his finger and was about to call Xiaohua and the others out. At this moment, the divine clone raised his eyebrows and his heart stirred. His left hand slowly formed a seal. The mysterious seal was actually a bit similar to the hand of karma in Xiaohua's space. Go! Before the divine clone could finish forming the seal, a brilliant light flashed around his body. The divine clone swayed and shot towards the southwest, which was similar to the direction the small bottle flew towards. Inside the cave, inside the formation, Xiaohua and the others were all paralyzed on the ground. Their eyes were filled with fear. That's right. When the 2 dots of light released their pressure, the 4 people closest to them couldn't avoid being alarmed by the pressure. That was such a terrifying pressure. A kind of ruthless, desolate, primitive and majestic feeling was born from the bottom of their hearts. For a moment, they felt that they were incomparably small and weak. Not only was their spiritual power unable to circulate, even the true chi around them seemed to have solidified. They couldn't circulate at all. Although it was only a moment, to them, it was like a few months or even a few years. Until the pressure had long disappeared and the divine clone in the air had also been projected away, Xiaohua murmured as if he was in a dream. Finally left? What kind of cultivation level is this senior? I feel that his cultivation level is unfathomable. Is there a senior undergoing tribulation here? Qian Diheng's gaze was also lifeless as he said blankly. No one answered him. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, Kun Fian shook his head and said, "This is the territory of my Imperial Thunder sect. No one will undergo tribulation here. Among the seniors of my Imperial Thunder sect, I haven't heard of anyone undergoing tribulation here. My true chi has signs of foundation building." Sun Shu suddenly shouted in surprise. -8. Chapter 1686. Hearing Qian Diheng's cry, Sun Shu and Kun Fei Yan also recovered from their fear and hurriedly checked their own cultivation. Sure enough, there were signs of true chi condensation. Unknowingly, the 3 of them revealed a joyful expression. "If you don't work hard now, when will you?" Xiaohua shouted, immediately waking the 3 of them up from their dreams. They sat up from the ground, facing the sky, and began to circulate their respective cultivation techniques. True chi slowly flowed in their meridians. But a day and night passed very quickly. Xiaohua's eager gaze gradually became dull. Although the 3 of them had a slight increase in their cultivation, none of them had taken the crucial step of foundation building. The next day, Kun Fei Yan was the first to open her eyes, full of unwillingness. Then, Sun Shu also stopped, sighed, and stood up. After another incense stick's worth of time, Qian Diheng also stopped cultivating. Looking at the 2 senior sisters who had also not built their foundation, he said, "What a pity, I keep feeling like I'm about to build my foundation, but my true chi just can't condense." Yes, true chi is at the stage where it seems to be condensed but not condensed. If not for Master's reminder, I would have long tried to take the foundation building pill, Kun Fei Yan said with puffed up cheeks. The opportunity hasn't arrived, Sun Shu concluded, and the 3 of them sighed. Seeing this, Xiaohua smiled and said, "What's wrong with 3 senior brothers? You haven't even left the Imperial Thunder Sect's territory and almost built your foundation. Isn't this a happy thing? If not for us staying behind by accident, how could we have encountered such a thing? If this isn't fate, then what is? Besides, although you haven't built your foundation, your cultivation is still a step closer. If you encounter another opportunity, won't it be easier for you to build your foundation? Isn't this much better than this little brother who failed to build his foundation? This little brother can't even congratulate you, what are you sighing about? Ha ha ha, junior brother Xiao is right. This brother was wrong." Qian Diheng was the most open-minded, and immediately grinned. Sun Shu and Kun Fian also came to their senses. The gloominess from being trapped and the regret from just now were all swept away. The 3 of them had just started their training and they had already encountered a fortuitous encounter. This naturally indicated that this training was a success. "All right, I'm afraid the rain has already passed. Let little brother take a look first," Xiaohua said as he opened up the array and used his divine sense to look outside. A trace of surprise appeared on his face. Sun Shu and the other 2 also scanned the cave with their divine senses, and they too smiled bitterly. But the cave was already covered in mud, and many trees, weeds, and rocks were piled on top of the cave. The 4 of them were actually buried deep underground. Fortunately, the 3 of them had made sufficient preparations. They also had earth escape talismans. Each of them cast a spell and burrowed out of the ground. Xiaohua also put away the talismans of the spell formation. As they flew into the air, the sun was right above their heads. The brilliant brilliance of the sun illuminated the mountains and rivers. Everything was full of vitality, and the danger from a few days ago was nowhere to be seen. Looking at the scenery below his feet and around him that was similar yet different from before, looking at the sun's eternal illumination, Xiaohua understood something. The Tao of heaven and earth is precisely in this change that remains unchanged. No matter how much the world changes, the great Tao of heaven and earth will forever exist in the world. If cultivators of my generation can comprehend the Tao of heaven and earth, they can be considered as having achieved great success in cultivation. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's heart moved again. Cultivation realm, all kinds of spells, it seems, they are all the changes of the Tao of heaven and earth, and comprehending the Tao of heaven is probably the foundation? Just as he thought of this, Jian Dihing shouted again from not far away. Junior brother Xiao, why are you still in a daze? Let's hurry up and continue our journey? Haha. Xiaohua laughed. I will listen to senior brother and sister's instructions. After he finished speaking, he followed Sun Shu and the others and flew towards the north. Previously, the Tao of heaven outside Xiaohua's body was to pursue the improvement of his cultivation. On one hand, he comprehended the Tao of heaven and starry sky in the space. On the other hand, he could increase his cultivation speed at the speed of a turtle. However, he had never thought about why there was such a connection. Naturally, with Xiaohua's cultivation and realm, it was impossible for him to know the relationship between the two. Now, he had an opportunity to comprehend the Tao of heaven by chance. Although it was very superficial, it was still true knowledge. Therefore, in his later cultivation, he wholeheartedly refined the flames in his meridians and even more painstakingly comprehended the Tao of heaven, getting closer and closer to the so-called heaven-reaching realm. It was Sun Shu who led Xiaohua and the others to continue flying towards the north. After flying for about 10 days, they turned around and headed west, then north again. They kept flying for more than a month. During this time, apart from the north and west, they actually went to the east and south several times. Xiaohua said that he wouldn't ask where they were going and would only travel with them. But after flying for so long, there was still no danger. Even other cultivators rarely saw this. On this day, Xiaohua couldn't help but fly to Sun Shu's side and ask with a smile. Senior sister Sun, this little brother has something to say, but I don't know if it's appropriate to say it. During this month, Sun Shu and the others didn't just bury themselves in hurrying on with their journey. At night, after cultivating, they often discussed with each other and exchanged their cultivation experiences. Xiaohua asked a lot of questions, but there were also a lot of questions that could be answered. Moreover, many of Xiaohua's questions were often things that they didn't know or had never encountered before. Therefore, in Sun Shu's eyes, Xiaohua became more and more mysterious. The mark of a loose cultivator in his heart had long been discarded. At this time, when he saw Xiaohua ask, he promptly cupped his hands and said, Junior brother Xiao, if you have something to say, there's no harm in saying it. It's nothing. Xiaohua looked at the clouds in the distance and said with a smile, This little brother just thinks that although the place we are going to is hidden, that place isn't unknown to everyone. What's so strange about us going there to gain experience this time? Why do we have to go around in circles like this? We can just go there directly. As if he had already prepared for this, Sun Shu's face revealed a trace of a smile. Junior brother Xiao was a loose cultivator before entering my Imperial Thunder sect. I presume that you have experienced more than us in the Dawn Rain continent. I wonder what fellow Xiao would think if he saw a cultivator wanting to go to a place that he absolutely couldn't go with his cultivation. This one would definitely think that cultivator has a special purpose. Xiaohua scratched his chin with his hand and said with a bitter smile, But we are at the late stage of qi refining. Even if it's one of the 10 most dangerous places in the Dawn Rain continent, it's not necessarily impossible for us to go. Junior brother Xiao should know. Kun Fian at the side opened his mouth and said at this time, If it's one of the 10 most dangerous places in the Dawn Rain continent, then Mo Zhao Black Forest, Ting Yen Yuan, and also the Profound Illusion Realm, they are all the closest to my Imperial Thunder sect. Although this dark mystery isn't the furthest, it's still very far. If we are purely going to gain experience, naturally there's no need for us to go to the dark mystery. Since we are going to the dark mystery, then bystanders will definitely know that we have a special purpose. But for this, we have to deliberately create a maze. Xiao Hua helplessly shook his head. Junior brother Xiao still doesn't have the awareness of being a disciple of the Imperial Thunder sect. Qian Diheng said with a laugh. How can the journey of our Imperial Thunder sect's disciples be a simple journey? With the guidance of our master's journey, why would we blindly wander around the Dawn Rain continent? Sun Shu thought for a while, bit his lip and said in a low voice. Actually, there's another reason. But junior brother Xiao must be happy to hear this. Say it, say it. Xiao Hua's heart moved and he said with a wave of his sleeve. This matter of the dark mystery is only known by a very small number of people in my Imperial Thunder sect. Not to mention Sun Thunder Palace and Jin Thunder Palace, even the masters in Qian Thunder Palace and Kun Thunder Palace who know about it can be counted with one's fingers. Therefore, we can't not let the other disciples of the Imperial Thunder sect know about our journey. In particular, we can't let the disciples of cultivator aristocratic families know. Sun Shu didn't mention loose cultivators, but since even the disciples of cultivator aristocratic families had to be concealed, those with loose cultivator backgrounds had to be concealed even more. If Xiao Hua hadn't saved Sun Shu and his cultivation was higher than the three of them probably wouldn't have dragged Xiao Hua to the dark mystery no matter what. Alas, so be it. Xiao Hua had long known that there was no pure land in the cultivator's sect. Hearing this explanation, he also shook his head. This kind of estrangement seemed to be innate. Didn't they see that he also looked down on Jinchikui? This humble Taoist is being frank with junior martial brother Xiao. I hope that junior martial brother Xiao can dispel your doubts. We really want to build our foundation, and we also need junior martial brother Xiao's help. We will not hide anything from you, nor will we have any thoughts that are not beneficial to junior martial brother Xiao. Sun Shu's tone was extremely sincere. Alas, senior sister Sun still misunderstood. As soon as Xiao Hua heard this, he understood that Sun Shu was worried that he would blame her for not telling him in advance, so she explained so much. If it was someone else, they might really have some thoughts in their heart, but who was Xiao Hua? His heart was very open, and he had always been considerate of other people's thoughts. How could he blame his own senior sister from the same sect? Besides, after killing 2 early-stage Foundation establishment cultivators, Xiao Hua's state of mind was even higher than Sun Shu and the others. Even if Sun Shu had some dirty thoughts in her heart, why would he care? Junior brother Xiao, cultivation is a path that goes against the heavens. Every cultivator has to seize the first opportunity. You can't blame us for being cautious. Qian Diheng flew to Xiao Hua's side and patted his shoulder, saying, I believe that junior brother Xiao has already failed to build his foundation once. Of course, you will cherish the next chance to build your foundation even more and know the hardships, right? The things in the dark mystery are very likely to allow junior brother Xiao to find the opportunity to build his foundation again. You say, can this kind of opportunity be known to others for no reason? Haha, is there even a need to say this? Naturally, it can't be leaked at all. Junior brother is not a fool. Xiao Hua laughed. He himself had many secrets, how could he not know the importance of it? Very good, very good. Sun Shu and the others breathed a sigh of relief. The stone in their hearts had been in their hearts ever since they left Sky Thunder Peak. Now, they could finally put it down. If Xiao Hua didn't ask for it for a day, they would be worried for a day. Now that Xiao Hua asked, the 4 of them could be considered to have no gaps in their hearts. I like junior brother Zhao's magnanimous heart the most. Qian Diheng pointed his hand and said, Today, I will agree with junior brother Xiao. Although the things in the dark mystery depend on opportunity, I will give this opportunity to junior brother Xiao first. Ah? Sun Shu and Kun Fian were stunned, looking at Qian Dihing unexpectedly. Don't. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said with a smile. Junior brother Qian understands senior brother Qian's thoughts. Since it depends on opportunity, then it depends on opportunity. If senior brother Qian can get it first, then it is senior brother Qian's. Junior brother, what? Junior brother Xiao wants to let me lose face? Qian Dihing pretended to be angry. -8. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.